On the busy street outside the building, Gordon and Artura were talking. Gordon inquired about Marge's whereabouts. Artura greeted him and said that he was still busy inside. Then she exclaimed, wondering why Marge was taking so long to come out. According to her, he should have managed faster since it involved only one skill. Marge was behind the door of that room. Marge, with a serious expression on his face, was intently reading a book. His room was cluttered with books, notes, and sheets with crossed-out text. He heard voices behind the door and thought it was Gordon and Artura. His name was Marge. He had an S rank, and he was part of a party called the Blade of the Silver God. His main ability was transferring skills to other team members. In the corridor stood 2 team members, shivering from the cold and holding onto their bodies. One of them asked why they were even standing there. The second complained about the cold in the corridor. Marge heard their voices and thought that it might be Ilya and Tina. They all belonged to the S-rank party called the Blade of the Silver God, possessing high combat skills and significant experience. Artur was a vanguard with the main skill of Holy Blade. He possessed additional abilities such as Eagle Eye and Attack Boost. Artura fought in an S-rank team called the Blade of the Silver God. Ilya was a talented sorceress of the same group. Thanks to the passive skill Wisdom of the Ancients, she used ancient spells and also had the abilities of speed reading and automatic mana recovery, applying them directly in battle. Gordon, the Royal Guard, possessed the passive skill Obsidian, turning him into an iron wall. With the skills Grip Enhancement and Steadfast Stride, he could withstand any attacks. Tina, the support priestess, used Angel's Feather, Spirit Enhancement, and Sustained Battle, capable of healing even the dying. They formed the S-rank party, Blade of the Silver God. 4 fighters, expertly applying the strongest skills on the battlefield, and Marge was considered the weakest among them. Marge possessed only one skill, Skill Transmitter, which allowed him to transfer any learned abilities to others. He spent years studying, living in the training room. The other party members thought he was taking on too much. Even if he learned new skills, they might be useless since the team already had too many abilities. Initially, the room was ordinary, but over time it turned into a repository of knowledge and materials. Marge was left alone in the room, immersed in thoughts. Hurtful words from others echoed in his head. It would be better if he just quit. We don't need him anymore. Marge is useless. Can't we manage without him? These phrases repeated in his mind until he suddenly snapped out of it. His attention shifted, and he thought about something important. An inner voice asked if the time had come. 3 years ago, the party successfully defeated the dungeon boss. Back then, Marge thought it was worth acquiring skills after clearing the next labyrinth to prepare for the A-rank dungeon. Despite doubts, no one could simply refuse such talent. However, Artur, confident in his own strength, decided not to heed Marge's opinion anymore. Returning to the present, Marge approached the door and grabbed the handle, preparing to leave. When Marge came out, the others looked at him with an expression similar to irritation or contempt that had accumulated during the wait. He calmly stated that he was finished and was now ready to pass on his skills, asking them to come closer. One of the team members exclaimed discontentedly, questioning why it took so long. The atmosphere remained tense, but Marge continued to act according to plan, not responding to the accusations. Marge said that he thought about the need to act more cautiously. Artura impatiently interrupted him and demanded to start faster. Then he calmly stated that he was going to transfer all 12 skills he had managed to learn. He asked the others to come closer to carry out the transfer process. Despite the tension of the situation, he continued to fulfill his role in the team, following his task to the end. Marge announced the beginning of the skill transfer and politely asked to choose the desired abilities. At that moment, it was as if a glowing list emanated from his body, displaying all the available skills. The other party members could see in front of them a list of abilities he had managed to learn over all this time. The transfer process began, and the atmosphere around was filled with magical energy. Marge activated the skill transfer ability. He stood with slightly bent arms, concentrating on the process. A glowing magical circle appeared around his hands, emitting a steady glow. The back of his clothing was slightly lifted by the flow of energy. The scene looked like a clear visual confirmation of the ability's activation. Everyone watched what was happening, waiting for the completion of the skill transfer that was supposed to enhance each team member. For each of the 4 team members, the selected skills were successfully transferred. The glowing circles disappeared, and the flow of magical energy around Marge ceased. The system confirmed the completion of the process with the phrase, "Skill transfer complete." All party members received new abilities, prepared in advance. Marge stood calmly. Having completed his task, the transfer went without errors, as planned. 4 party members were talking among themselves, claiming that nothing was impossible for them and now they were definitely ready. Hearing this, Marge thought about his own dungeon, but as usual, the others left together and he headed in a different direction. In his head, the thought echoed that, as always, no one had said a word of thanks. He remembered the dining hall and how he had spent the whole night studying skills, forgetting even to eat. The cafeteria employee handed over the order from the Blade of the Silver God and thanked him. Marge noticed that the bread was the same one that the others had eaten days ago, and it wasn't even water as usual. One of the party members, passing by, told him not to delay and reminded him that they were leaving tomorrow, so he shouldn't oversleep. Marge replied briefly, "Fine." In his thoughts, he noted that they eat meat every day, and it's disgusting. 4 team members entered the S-rank dungeon called the Magical Abyss. Artura warned the others not to get underfoot, announcing that she would use the Holy Blade. She ordered them to sit quietly until she gave the signal, threatening punishment in case of disobedience. When Marge knelt down like the others, he was addressed with stern words. "Please, do not cause us problems. You must not hinder your comrades in battle." Marge, holding back his anger, imagined in his mind how he himself activated the Holy Blade. In his imagination, the command sounded, "Activate." He imagined how with a powerful blow he destroyed everyone who was near him. In this imaginary scenario, he even took someone's head, expressing hidden rage. This scene existed only in his head as a way to release accumulated emotions and resentment. Thanks to the heightened reaction provided by the Eagle Eye skill, Artura could use many of the abilities passed on by Margem. Skills accumulated SP, and the higher the value, the stronger the effect. Upon reaching the maximum SP of 999,999, the skill changed form. Some acquired skills as early as 8 to 12 years old. This was considered rare. Skills operated on the principle of a spinning wheel. The more water, the faster the activation, but an excess of water changed the entire process. Such abilities differed from the usual ones. It was said that the head of the guild once ran at full speed to an 8-year-old girl who possessed unique skills. They made a contract with her on a napkin about joining. With her help, Marge could transfer skills he himself possessed to others. His skill transfer was also considered a unique ability. However, if he used, for example, Attack Boost, he would not be able to unlock its potential. These skills reach their true power only in the hands of others, like Artura, 10 times stronger. With this thought, Marge spent days on end cramming books, striving to be useful. He understood that if he wasn't around, the skills simply wouldn't work. He wanted to bring maximum benefit with his unique ability. Once, he was invited to a party as a bearer of the god's gift. In those days, he was given this title. And it was then that he passed the Eagle Eye skill to Artura. Now, however, he was reduced to the role of a porter, humiliated and avoided. The team advanced through the legendary dungeon Magic Abyss, having passed most of it without much difficulty. One of the participants noted that everything turned out to be a piece of cake, and apologized for the need to use the angel's feather. Inside, there were many monsters, but nothing truly dangerous. The traps almost didn't trigger. However, this dungeon was filled with toxic monsters, and the poison itself was the main threat. Many teams perished precisely because of this, underestimating the hidden danger. Marge understood that they managed to pass the dungeon largely thanks to the skills transferred to them. Those who perished here before did not know the features or the order of applying the skills, they just used the skills without a system. For this quartet, it turned out to be just a walk. Someone mockingly shouted, "Marge, did you really wet your pants?" He knew. It was too late to complain. If they moved too far away, the skills would stop working. He needed to maintain a certain distance with them. Marge understood that if he stepped away from them by even 3 steps, the skills would cease to function. He could have allowed these two to simply collapse from the toxin, but he considered it pointless, so he didn't do it. Despite the contempt and ridicule, he continued to maintain the necessary distance to protect them. Breaking the connection would mean losing all the transferred skills, and he couldn't allow that. In the past, traps in the dungeon were generated randomly, so it was important to know their location. Marge reminded that he had given Artora the scout's premonition skill, but she demanded to be shown the direction. She was annoyed that he didn't have a skill that directly indicated the path. He often kept important skills for passing to himself, as Artora never considered others' opinions. She blamed him for failures, even though she didn't understand how the skills worked. In the end, it was decided he would not be paid. Artora activated the scout's premonition skill. One of the team members asked if she noticed anything, and she replied that the object was huge. Marge, observing this, thought that all that remained was to hope her bad mood would disappear before returning to the surface. He knew that he usually received less than 1/10 of the payment and understood that he couldn't be cheeky, otherwise the consequences would be serious. At that moment, he noticed a door located on the right, which caught his attention. 5 approached the massive door with an engraved image. Everyone understood. This was definitely the boss's room. One suggested it was a snake, another a dragon. According to the stories of those who had already been in this dungeon, everyone who reached this place inevitably lost their companions. The atmosphere became tense, and there was a sense of danger that could not be avoided. Marge thought that their preparation was not in vain, but it seemed that none of those present realized it. He silently watched the door, feeling the weight of every death that had occurred up to that moment. Someone from the group confidently said that this was the boss's room. The others quickly agreed, satisfied with how quickly they managed to find it. The atmosphere was tense, but no one backed down. Marge recalled with bewilderment that usually in such situations Arthur would sharply shout something like, "Out of the way." But now he asked what their plan was. And when Arthur asked where they were, he reminded him that this was the boss's room in the dungeon. He quietly replied that he understood that himself. Arthur sighed and added that perhaps it would be worth sending him to scout the area. Marge anxiously asked if he really had to enter the room alone. However, the other group members looked at him with misunderstanding, as if the question did not even deserve discussion. The answer was obvious. Their gazes weighed on him, as if he was simply obliged to do it. Arthur, without showing a hint of doubt or sympathy, replied directly and coldly, "Who else, if not you?" With his tone, he made it clear that it was more of an order than a request. Marge discontentedly asked what the point was in going alone and what benefit it would bring to the team. Arthur reacted irritably, accusing him of just being annoying. Then Darge calmly reminded him that attempting to evade the task was a direct violation of the guild's 17th rule. Arthur smirked and noted that he was quite perceptive. He then added that even the highest-ranking group, Class S, cannot break guild rules with impunity. After all, in the world of adventurers, adherence to these laws is monitored very strictly. One of the group members asked Marge how many years he had been with them, and he replied, 7. Despite all this time, he still cannot understand the essence of what is happening. Then an important rule is explained. If one of the team members dies, the guild is obliged to pay compensation for each year of joint work. That is, if someone dies, the remaining members receive a large sum. After all, the profession of an adventurer is extremely dangerous, and those who survive for a long time deserve generous rewards. Dargy is shocked that Arthur is truly ready to break an important guild rule for profit. He turns to the other team members, Tina, Gordon, and Elia, and indignantly asks if they also agree with this action. The situation becomes tense, as it involves betraying a comrade for money and violating the Seeker's code. Marge is shocked by what is happening. Despite 6 years of joint struggle, the others agree with the decision to get rid of him. He recalls arguing with them, but realizes that the majority supports the leader's order. He feels betrayed and wonders how his contribution turned out to be unimportant to anyone. Then, in desperation, he turns to the team, reminding them that if he leaves, their skills will no longer work, as it is he who supports their strength. Arthur coldly explains to Marge that keeping a useless ally is like living in debt. He compares him to a financial deficit. The longer he stays on the team, the more losses they incur. Arthur claims that if they clear the dungeon without him, they will officially become an S-class party. His words make it clear. Marge is no longer a comrade to them, but a burden that needs to be disposed of for the sake of profit. Marge recalls trying to ignore how he was being treated. He believed that their work benefited society, hoped for luck and mutual respect. But now he understands that his presence on the team was simply considered a loss. The others, without hiding it, suggest he die, for profit. If he agrees, he will be replaced by a first-class alchemist, and the team will live in luxury. Marge calmly but firmly replies that he understands everything. However, before leaving or accepting their terms, he demands the return of all the skills he imparted to the other group members. His patience is exhausted, and now he intends to take back what is his. Marge demands to have his skills returned, but he is mocked, with people saying he must be crazy if he thinks it's possible. He is rudely refused and told that the skills will disappear on their own when he dies. Then he ponders. If that's the case, maybe he still has a chance to at least deal damage to the boss. He remembers that it's enough just to say the return command to get the skills back. The others are curious about how long he can hold out. Marge activates the skill transfer ability in reverse. He firmly utters the return command, demanding the return of all abilities previously transferred to others. The skills begin to leave his comrades and return to him. The others take it calmly, with cold acceptance, as if they had already resigned themselves to this turn of events. They allow him to take back everything he had given, without resistance. He tightly grips his head and feels the strength returning to him. The approval of the others confirms. They no longer object. The process of skill return has begun. Energy starts to glow around him, emanating from those who previously acquired the skills. One by one, the skills return to his body, filling him from within. The return is complete. Now he is once again the sole possessor of all abilities. He activated the skill transfer support and heard a familiar, almost indistinguishable female voice. Only he could catch it. This voice helps him regain all his abilities. The process of return has begun, but it is slow, and the skill indicates that full recovery will take time. Nevertheless, all skills are gradually returning. He feels the pain of overload, but clearly understands one thing. Now he is their owner again. And he remembers how many debts remain for the others. During the return of skills, he reminded the others about the service fee. The highest rate is 10% for every 10 days. He clarified that he had mentioned this during the first transfer, and now it was time to pay. One of the participants reacted with surprise, claiming that this had not been discussed. However, he calmly replied that he remembered everything precisely, and the terms were exactly as stated. Marge reminded them that the transfer of skills had been happening regularly over many years, and now he demands everything back with interest. At first, the others did not understand what he was talking about, but then they realized how much he had done for them and how much he had invested. Some regretted that they would lose access to useful skills upon return, but admitted that they rarely used them and therefore did not object. Despite the grievances, Marge was calm and focused. He knew that he was justly demanding what was his. After the return of Elia's skills, one of the team members tried to apologize to Marge. She admitted that they were wrong, and thought that he might have wanted to take revenge on them, but he still remained honest. She asks not to hold a grudge, and explains that the calculation of the debt occurs at the moment of the return of abilities. However, Marge calmly but sternly reminds them that the payment for his abilities is calculated using a compound interest system, meaning the debt increased over time. This shocks the others, as they clearly underestimated how much he had given them and how deep their debt now was. After Elia's apologies, Marge calmly explained the difference between simple and compound interest. Initially, everything seems similar. Interest is charged on the original amount. But over time, the interest is added to the new, increased base, causing the debt to grow faster. He emphasized that this is exactly how skill transfer works. The other team members finally realized how seriously they had underestimated his contribution and how deeply they had gotten into debt without even realizing it before. Ilia mockingly remarks that Marju is entitled to only 10 points, demands to hand over the supplies, and sends him off to the boss. Finally, with feigned pity, she prays for his soul. However, after calculating how the debt grows with compound interest, she suddenly realizes the scale. In a year, the amount will increase tenfold, and in 2 years, it will become astronomical. The thought of how quickly the debt accumulates horrifies her and knocks her off her mocking tone. As expected from a sorceress with ancient knowledge, Alia quickly grasped the principle of compound interest and easily calculated the total debt. Her face paled at the realization of the scale. The realization of the debt becomes a shock not only for her, but for the others as well. At this moment, Arthur, indifferent and cold, turns to Marge and dryly throws farewell words. "Ciao, Darge," as if putting an end to their relationship. After the calculations, Alia realized the full extent of the debt and turned pale. Silence hung in the air, and at that moment, Arthur, showing neither regret nor hesitation, approached Marge, and with the words "Ciao," Darge sharply kicked him. He didn't manage to stay on his feet and flew towards the boss's door. The entrance immediately began to close behind him, completely cutting him off from the others. When the door almost closed, the other team members silently turned and left without looking back. Not one of them uttered a word. But Alia suddenly froze, stretched her hand forward, and with a trembling voice said, "Wait!" However, her words dissolved into the silence, and the heavy door finally slammed shut. Marge remained on the other side, alone, without support, but with regained skills and a duty that no one intended to acknowledge. The skill return process was completed, and the system reported the first successfully restored ability. It was Eagle Eye, a skill previously owned by Arthur. At the same time, it was announced that the debt level had reached an incredible value. Marge began collecting SP, and the amount of interest exceeded all reasonable limits. These figures no longer mattered. The important thing was the fact itself. He regained the power that others had so easily deemed useless. After the completion of the return, the system announces the start of SP collection, with a percentage exceeding 100 trillion. Information about the Eagle Eye skill, previously belonging to Arthur, appears on the screen. Marge, maintaining her composure, observes the process as the numbers reach an absurd level. His mind almost shuts down from the shock, but inside, confidence is growing. Everything is coming full circle, and everyone who underestimated him will soon realize their mistake. Marge activates the safety mechanism and finds himself in a new zone, which the system calls the guaranteed area. Although he is there alone, he does not feel fear. On the contrary, he feels a strange calm. He is surprised by the absence of cold. At this moment, he notices that he is completely without clothes, which causes brief confusion. But his inner confidence does not leave him. This place is the beginning of the next stage, and he is ready to move forward. After the powerful explosion, Marge recovers with the help of healing magic, and discovers that he has ended up in some spatial area. He realizes that only his consciousness has been transferred, not his body. The place represents the limits of his mind. A voice informs him that there was no brain damage, so contact is possible. Marge is surprised. He thought the system was just a mechanism, but now he understands that it has personality and intelligence. Marge realizes that the recovery process is nearing completion, and soon he will awaken. He is struck by the fact that the system knew everything in advance, even about the lost time. He suspects that someone set up this mechanism, but receives no answer. Before awakening, the system reminds him, all the knowledge they now possess must be used only for good. These words sound like the last instruction left by someone who foresaw everything. The being admits that it has always been with them, watching through their eyes while remaining unnoticed. It was part of their S-Class team, but no one even noticed its existence. Despite this, it knew everything, even about the lost time that went unnoticed by others. Its last hope is that the power they now possess will be used for good, not harm. The process of body restoration is complete. Awakening and connection with the brain begins. The hero realizes that the one who was always nearby has finally manifested. All skills are now taken away, and he feels empty, but still clings to one thing: the desire to know the name of the one who was hiding all this time. In the moment between sleep and awakening, he asks, at least now, just tell me your name. When the awakening was almost complete, he opened his eyes and looked up. Against the dazzlingly bright background, a name slowly appeared, Koei. It seemed to hang in the air, shimmering as if it were part of the very space. The hero silently whispered it, feeling how this short but powerful word resonated in his consciousness. After discovering a sudden invasion in the dungeon, the group faces a dilemma. Artura insists on immediately killing Marge, considering it the only sensible solution. Aaliyah, although known for her logic, hesitates, as the proposal seems too cruel to her. One of the team members is surprised by her reaction, as she is usually cold-blooded. Tension hangs in the air. A decision needs to be made quickly, but the choice is far from obvious. Aaliyah objects to the proposal to kill Marge, emphasizing that one should not speak so lightly about murder. It's too cruel. She reminds them that he might still die from the dungeon boss, and therefore eliminating him now is not only pointless but also wrong. Meanwhile, Marge, weakened, tries to say something, but his speech is interrupted. He denies what he heard, trying to express disagreement and gather strength. Marge, gasping, tries to understand what is happening. He whispers about angel wings, but does not hear them, as if the expected strength does not come. His breathing becomes intermittent, and he loses orientation. Panic intensifies when he realizes that he cannot take a full breath. Fear grows inside, and his body seems to stop obeying. Everything around becomes deaf and distant, leaving him alone. Marge comes to in complete darkness and realizes that he lost consciousness for a moment, although it felt like a long time had passed. The light flickers weakly in certain places. The rest is shrouded in darkness. The boss has not yet started the attack. The headache has disappeared. The bleeding has stopped. He feels his strength returning. All the necessary skills are gathered, and the process is complete. His power has noticeably increased, and he is ready for the upcoming battle. After recovery, Marge receives updated versions of his abilities. Eagle Eye becomes Divine Eye, Instant Dash becomes Cosmic Leap, and SP Recovery turns into an inexhaustible source. Attack Enhancement changes to Destructive Power, and all other skills evolve. He feels the power return to him, activates abilities, and prepares to take control of the situation, relying on the returned forces, without which he would not have survived. On an elevation in the center of the hall is a giant dragon named Vritra. Its scale is striking, and it occupies almost the entire space of the arena. The massive scales, wings, and a terrifying aura fills the silence of the room. It does not move, but its presence is oppressive. Vritra is not just a creature. It is the last and main opponent that Marge must defeat in this deadly trial. The dragon Vritra emits a deadly poison that fills the entire dungeon. Without special protection, any approach to it will lead to immediate death. He is the most powerful monster in the depths of the dungeon, and his presence is distinctly felt. Defeating him is necessary, otherwise escape is impossible. The reward for his destruction is great, but the battle itself is mortally dangerous. Vritra has already sensed the approach of an opponent, and the tension is rising. The battle with the dragon seems impossible, any weapon proves useless. The tension reaches its peak, and the only way out is to use a skill. The ability Cosmic Leap is activated to overcome the deadly distance. The decision is made instantly. There may not be another chance. Even if victory is unlikely, action is necessary. Everything hinges on one leap, capable of changing the outcome of the fight and saving from imminent death. Behind him, additional limbs suddenly appear, 6 mighty arms, each moving with incredible speed and strength. The skill 6 Arms of Ashura is activated, enhancing the fighter's physical power. These arms not only increase the number of attacks, but also allow deflecting blows from different directions. The entire appearance of the fighter transforms, instilling fear. Now he is ready for a brutal fight where the price is survival. When the snake-like opponent approached, the 6 manifested hands reacted lightning fast. Each of them grabbed the scaly body at different points, with incredible precision and strength. With one sharp movement, they pushed the snake back, disrupting its attack. The creature staggered, emitting a dull hiss. The space around trembled with tension. The skill provided a decisive advantage, temporarily disabling the enemy and opening up the opportunity for the next strike. The serpent flew back, and at the place of its fall, the ground began to crumble and break off, as if unable to bear its weight. Deep cracks spread across the floor, raising clouds of dust and debris. However, when everything settled, the monster rose again as if nothing had happened. Its body had neither a scratch nor a dent. For an unkillable dragon, much more strength is needed. If it were an ordinary monster, it certainly would not have remained intact. A system window appeared with the message, "Do you want to move to the next level?" All skills were restored, but the SP percentage reached a terrifying mark: 116,144,339,696%. He understood that if he tried to use this power again, his brain simply wouldn't withstand it. Once a day was already too much. The system reported that, due to the overflow of SP, the excess would be directed to debt repayment. Now it was necessary to choose which skill would be confiscated. The screen displayed the message, "Please select the skill to be confiscated." The skill has been selected. Activating. Ilya had a skill called Wisdom of the Ancients, confiscated. After confiscation, it changed and became a new skill, Divine Aaron. This new skill is now linked not only to Ilya, but also to other members of the Blade of the Silver God group. Their abilities are no longer entirely personal. They are under control through the existence or disappearance of the owner. In other words, if something happens to the owner, it will affect everyone. The skills have become a reflection of existence itself, a kind of second name, an inner core. For them, these are no longer just abilities. They are the foundation of their life and strength. If you have borrowed abilities, you are obliged to return them. This is a rule of fairness. At the moment, these are all the possible points available for collection. Ilya's SP has reached a critical negative, minus 99,999,999. Due to such a huge debt, the system will activate full confiscation mode for complete settlement. All SP obtained by her can be seized without remainder. In this mode, skills, powers, and even part of consciousness can be erased or reprocessed. This is not just a penalty. It is a complete reset, a cleansing of the system from unauthorized enhancement. With the help of the Divine Aria, which is a skill of the mind, he activated the ability and returned to the distant past to gain knowledge in the field of magical mastery. The mastery of the art of ice began. The slow activation of the cessation of Aria was used, which reduces energy consumption during superspeed magic. He learned this from a person from the past. The attack enhancement skill was replaced with the Celestial Rupture. Synergy allows enhancing abilities to a new level. He activated the Ice Sword and delivered a powerful blow, causing cracks to instantly spread across the snake's body. Under the influence of the cold, its flesh began to crack and crumble. A second later, the monster exploded, and its body shattered into pieces. All the fragments were covered with frost and scattered across the floor. The ice halted regeneration. The snake was completely destroyed. The attack was instantaneous and precise. Everything was finished in one strike. After the explosion of ice, one of the mangled pieces of the body began to move weakly, covered in steam. Noticing this, he whispered that the monster was still trying to recover. Despite the icy destruction, the serpent did not die. Its life force is astonishingly great, frightening. But thanks to special magic, the power of regeneration was sealed. Even in the conditions of millennia-old frost, this monster continues to fight for existence, clinging to the remnants of consciousness. The transition to a higher level has been made. The skill range increase has been improved to boundless infinity. The cosmic leap was instantly activated, allowing him to overcome any distance. High above the blue sky, he stopped in flight, perceiving space differently. An ocean of endless stars spread out before his eyes. He clearly envisions the entire range, from the nearest light to the farthest reaches. Everything around is recognizable. He can fly anywhere, to any corner of the universe. In a space where time loses its meaning, the question arises: where do you wish to move? This choice will determine future fate. To the heavens, perhaps. 1,000 years before the glaciers melt, and 1,000 years before rebirth. Now there is a chance to hide so far that even the dungeon boss will not be able to detect them. The possibility of disappearing from all possible coordinates of reality becomes real. The question is not about distance. The question is about will. Movement begins with a thought. The dungeon began to collapse, and the boss disappeared. This serves as clear evidence of victory. All the monsters and traps vanished along with him. Probably Artur's group will be saved by the antidote development team. The squad members are likely still unconscious due to the effects of the SAA. But even now, in the darkness, someone's presence is felt. He took part of the boss's body, possibly the core or a fragment of power. But now, on the surface, it seems something has changed. Something has happened. If raised correctly from childhood, he can be beneficial. That's why it was decided to take him under guardianship. This egg, does it belong to Vritra? If it breaks, the transformation process can be stopped. But what to do? The only one capable of defeating Vritra is himself. However, in those times there will be no one left who can stop the awakened one. It was decided to take him to the Sea of Stars. Vritra will awaken in 2,000 years. The characters agreed to leave the dangerous place by activating the space jump. One of them unexpectedly thanked the other for their support, which became an important moment for him. Then he began to prepare food using his culinary skill. They decided that they no longer had any reason to stay and hurried to leave. That day, only one member of their entire team managed to escape from the collapsed dungeon. The others either remained unconscious or disappeared along with the monsters. He emerged alone, tired but alive. Once on the surface, he finally allowed himself to relax. He cooked hot soup, tasted normal food, and realized that he was no longer afraid. The silence around was unfamiliar, but there was something comforting in it. He knew the journey was not yet over. He received a reward and allowance for saving the team and escaping the dungeon. He was given a separate room to rest. He was asked if he could hear anyone. It was a connection with Ardor, who was still alive. The guild had already officially processed his departure from the party. He made this decision consciously. For the first time in a long while, he felt true peace inside, as if the world finally allowed him to just breathe. The character thanked his companion for constant protection and support, emphasizing how important his presence was. He asked who he wanted to become and offered to give him a physical body. In response, he expressed a desire to be a beautiful girl, for his sake. Then he asked for one favor, explaining that there had been problems with his fiancée before, and misunderstandings had occurred. He didn't want to force such words, but now sincerely extended a modest gift. It was accepted without objection. She admitted that she just wanted to touch him with her own hands. He understood her feelings. Then he added that no skill is capable of creating life from nothing. He wondered if she could really do it. But after that, he noticed something important that might change their perception of the situation. He stated that he uses the second debt. If the body has consciousness, that's a completely different conversation. It is impossible to create a body without consciousness with skill, and an empty vessel will remain just a shell. However, if he manages to create the body itself, he will later be able to pour consciousness into it. The skill is chosen. The ability skill return is activated. Processing has begun. The time of the collector has come. The next stage is inevitable. The skill Angel's Feather was confiscated from Tina and transformed into a new form, Benevolence of the Fiery Angel. With its help, apostolic body parts, including arms and legs, are created. This process requires precision and control. As the vessel is formed anew, Koei is instructed to prepare. The activation of Benevolence of the Fiery Angel initiates the formation of the vessel, allowing it to acquire a divine shell. The creation stage concludes with the merging of energy and holy power. The transfer of the functional personality into the real world began. The coordinate system was activated, and an exact correspondence to the muscle fibers of each part of the created vessel was established. Synchronization was successful. Magical pro-transmitters started the movement of energy according to the specified scheme. With closed eyes and an outstretched hand, he carefully completed the process. The girl's body began to form right in the air, reflecting her essence. Magic and will merged to breathe life into the new shell intended for her awakening. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the girl he had created was already lying on his arm. Her body was warm, her breathing steady, and her face shone with a gentle light. She blinked slowly, her gaze meeting his eyes for the first time. In that moment, he realized that the awakening was complete. The vessel had become a living being. He awoke with her, feeling how the completed magic filled the space with silence and meaning. It was the beginning of a new life. The created girl sat down, looked at him, and quietly asked if she could ask 2 questions. She thanked him for the life he gave her, as if he had become her parent. Previously she called him Master, but now she wants to call him simply Marge. Then she smiled and, a little embarrassed, added that she would address him as her master. This name, according to her, is worthy of respect, and, a little later, she warmly added, "Can she consider him her own?" The girl suddenly remembered a situation from the past when the Goridon team accidentally entered a maid cafe, and she saw something strange there. After a short pause, she embarrassedly noted that she wasn't wearing any clothes. The guy immediately realized that he had forgotten about this in the rush of activating skills. He quickly began to act to fix this, as the newly created body was not dressed, and the girl sat in front of him completely naked, covering herself with her hand. He lent her his spare clothes, asking her to put them on as quickly as possible, even though they might not fit her size. The girl gladly put them on, noting that the clothes still smelled of the master, and this made her happy. While they waited for the opportunity to buy new ones, he activated the restoration of weapons and armor. He also decided to enhance the armor, body, and healing range, using the Angel's Feather skill and the Blessing of the Fire Angel, planning to change and improve everything necessary. He warned that they now had a dragon with them, and due to its size, they would not be able to stay in a big city. They needed to find a place where they could raise Vritra. She agreed, and he added that he himself was tired of city people. He also warned her to be careful, as there are people with perverse thinking. She saw the world through his eyes and had not yet had experience interacting with people. They decided to leave and start everything from scratch, away from unnecessary attention. The hero, raising his sword, proposed a toast to the frozen dragon, using his Holy Blade skill, emphasizing that his abilities do not deal lethal blows but are quite effective. The girl, a bit confused, asked which foot to start with, the right or the left. He noted that Arthur and Gordon were still left, mentioning the skills Wisdom of the Ancients and Angel's Feather. Then he firmly promised that he would return everything that had been taken from him and was ready to move further towards his goal. Arthur, raising his glass, shouted a toast to the frozen dragon and activated the Holy Blade. He wondered why the boss's body was nowhere to be found, then admitted that he might have had too much to drink. In his drunken state, he mumbled that he couldn't master Harlequin. Soon, he was overwhelmed by the realization of betrayal. If Marge hadn't betrayed them, they would be celebrating victory. The other participants flared up with anger, as they had trusted Marge as a comrade. They couldn't believe he could have risen in level so abruptly. Arthur shouted irritably that he couldn't master skills like others. He was interrupted with a question. Hadn't he improved the skill borrowed from Marge? Then a dispute began. In 6 years, one can master only 10 to 20 skills, as each requires at least 3 months or even a year. Someone emphasized that even with such skills, 4 cannot be defeated. This caused distrust and accusations of lying. One of the warriors sarcastically noted that being ignorant is very convenient. One of the fighters reminded that the rescue team had found them a week ago. However, when the others woke up in the dungeon, Marja had already been missing for 3 days. An angry argument began. Where did that bastard go? It was noted that his capture had been completed even before the group awoke. The rescuers reported that the room was covered in ice, and the remains of a dragon lay at the entrance. No one knew where Marja had disappeared to, but it was he who reported the capture, and then vanished without a trace. Saik began shouting at the girl, demanding explanations. He irritably inquired about what had happened. Then he stated that if she didn't like it, she should listen to the team's opinion. One of the group members warned her about possible aggression, advising her to stop acting out. Sei came closer and threatened that her head might still be useful. He continued to insist, asking if she had noticed anything strange. Seike demanded that the girl not delay with her answer and start talking. She calmly replied that he was right and switched to another topic. She stated that she was sharing information obtained earlier. Then, she unexpectedly started talking about food, noting that everything here was very tasty. She mentioned bread that should be dipped in corn soup. In the end, she asked if it wasn't delicious, completely ignoring the tense atmosphere and Sake's displeasure. Arthur exclaimed with irritation that nonsense was happening, and added that it was once believed that such people had revived the era of humanity. He called the situation the most absurd premonition of the year, Then he indignantly noted how Elia was eating all the food ended up on the table. Despite her reputation as a brilliant girl capable of explaining natural and social phenomena, he doubted this, stating that neither intelligence nor wisdom was evident in her behavior now. Darge explained that this place was developed during the last war by the second prince to avoid further conflicts. Now it is much easier to travel along this road, but taxes are levied for it. It is important for the land managers to maintain safety. He also mentioned Duke Abigam, who hates conflicts. After that, he inquired whether the girl had gotten used to walking. She confirmed, adding that this road connects many cities, so there are always many people here. Darge explained that if a barrier is installed, a fee will also be charged for passing through it. In this area, there are probably about 100 people living, and the landowner is quite resourceful. To avoid excessive taxes, the owners built villages and cities in such places. However, taxes are also required to maintain troops against monsters. Monsters often appear in the fields, which are hunted for loot. If the city continues to exist, the economy will develop. One such city is Kinui. After that, he turned to the master. He noted that her words contradict previous statements. In this world, once you fix one thing, a new problem immediately arises elsewhere. It's an endless cycle. Then he said that perhaps the reason lies in her beauty. She replied that his words make sense, as many dangers always gather at night. Zombies, night dogs, burnt flesh. These creatures appear suddenly and make night expeditions particularly risky. The world is unstable, and order in one place does not guarantee peace in another. They wonder if magical creatures will attack them, as they are ordinary people. It is unknown if this affects anything. One of them admits that he could have used a jump but decided not to. He wants to give her time to learn everything. He is impressed by the girl with silvery hair and wide-open eyes. She asks if it isn't enough that they were able to fend off with their skill. He replies that the one who possesses the skill also has special manners. Everything he has accumulated now seems to be calling him forward. One of them is impressed by the capabilities of the satellites. He replies that everything depends on creativity. Everything around, according to him, seems to work automatically. He asks to activate the space jump around the tent and enhance its effect with star frost. The girl reminds him that the skills work synergistically. Thanks to this, they will be able to notice approaching monsters in advance and eliminate the threat immediately. However, the number of enemies surprises them. Realizing that they cannot delay, they decide to move faster towards the city to avoid unnecessary danger. The city of Kinui is considered a hotel city, as travelers often stop here to rest. There are many hotels of different levels and classes in this place, with and without meals. There are also small shops everywhere where you can buy everything you need for the further journey: equipment, utensils, provisions. The city is adapted to the needs of those who are constantly on the road, so it is always crowded and lively here. The atmosphere in Kinui is very different from the previous city. It's noisier, livelier, but no one stays for long. The city is built right on the main road, and it serves more as a temporary refuge for weary travelers. Locals offer fried sweets and treats right on the streets, creating a fair-like feeling. One of the characters is interested in a new delicacy and asks a question about it. The setting remains relaxed and convenient for a brief respite. The scene takes place in a tense atmosphere. An unknown man rudely scolds a maid with ears, ordering her to finish her work before she receives anything. The girl lies on the ground, exhausted, but obediently replies that she will do everything. At this point, Darge intervenes, observing the situation from the sidelines. He notes the girl's race with doubt or irritation and asks the master a question. It is evident that the situation causes him internal tension or dissatisfaction. When the girl with ears and a huge tail stood up, Darge said to himself with surprise and wariness, "Beowulf?" His reaction revealed that he recognized in her a representative of a rare or possibly dangerous race. Her animal ears and massive fluffy tail immediately gave away her nature. The atmosphere remained tense, and his guest clearly changed his attitude towards what was happening. Hearing the word werewolf, he immediately remembered that representatives of this race originally lived in the forests. But after people seized the werewolves' lands and drove them away, seeing one of them became a rarity. He noted that something was wrong with her, although he didn't exactly understand what. It seemed that this place was once green too, but after the war, people cleared the entire area, cut down the trees, and then Duke Abig settled this territory. Such was the history of these lands. The inhabitants of ESA Forest had thick fur, sharp claws, and fangs, and were renowned for their ferocity and endurance in battles. They were very proud of themselves. So the legend goes, they were feared on the battlefield, for they knew no fatigue. He looked at the girl and noted that her appearance was very different from what was told. Strong claws, thick fur, everything resembled that race, but something was off. He apologized and called the master. The girl with ears and a tail finished her work and sighed heavily. The man looked at her with irritation and called her a stinky, useless mutt, ordering her to eat without objections. He was angry that those like her ended up at such a low level after losing the war. He was surprised at how quickly everything had changed. He called her a slowpoke and wondered if time even worked for those like her. The girl silently accepted the food, lowering her gaze. The girl was eating broth made of nothing and stale bread, and her honey was terrible. Among all the workers, only she had it so bad. The man recognized in this food the same that he was once given in the blade of the silver god. He remembered those times and said that if someone wants to save others from poverty, they must be ready for audacity. He added that one should not be afraid of hypocrisy and naivete. The girl quietly nodded, not interrupting her meal. The man said that they would save her anyway and agreed to stay in this place for another 10 days. The girl confirmed his decision. He stated that he was going to go where the owner was, as he wanted to talk to him. After that, he headed to the inner office. The girl remained standing in place, watching him leave, and continued to ponder everything that had happened. The atmosphere around was quiet, but tense. While the tailed girl was eating with her hands, a man approached her and informed her that the payment would be made later. He ordered all the sacks of flour to be taken to the warehouse. The total cost of this cargo was 3,000 yen. Then he added that he had already spoken with her master. The girl continued eating without looking up from her food, but listened attentively. She nodded silently, acknowledging that she understood the instruction and prepared to carry out the task. The man walked away, leaving her alone with her food and future work. The girl with the tail was sitting on the ground, finishing the leftovers, when an irritated voice rang out. The man looked at her with fury and shouted that it was complete nonsense to pay for such slop. He pointed to a pile of flour sacks and protested that such an amount couldn't be gathered in one day. For just the food, they'd charge her 300 yen. He came closer and, looking into her eyes, angrily asked who she even was and what he had done to her. His eyes blazed with indignation. While the boy watched the girl in rags, he wondered if she was really an ordinary child. Internally, he doubted it. Unlikely. Despite her pitiful appearance, an unquenchable fire burned in her eyes. He felt something strange, uncertainty mixed with respect. In those eyes was reflected a strength about which ancient legends were told. She did not look dangerous, but her presence made one wary and take her every movement seriously. The guy sighed, realizing that his intention to help had turned into unforeseen consequences. He just wanted to do a good deed, but the situation began to unfold differently. He informed the girl that her reward was 3,000 yen, and immediately demanded that she give him 600 of them. Then he added that if she listened to him, she could earn 10 times more. His voice sounded calm, but there was pressure in it. It was as if he was testing her, whether she would agree to the new conditions for a better life. The guy coldly said that she wouldn't last even 10 seconds, which is why she is considered useless. He ordered her to complete the task by the next day. The girl hesitated, recalling the master's words, but heard that she had the skill of strengthening her legs. However, its effect is too short-lived and it is of little use. He noted that her ability has potential, and added that he could extend the duration. Then he asked a question. What if she used this skill for several weeks? Could that really be possible? The guy explained the conditions. You can get half of the 3,000 in reward in a short time. He showed the calculations. 300 times 4, deduction for food, the rest, her share. The work might take 4 days, but if she finishes by tomorrow, the result will be more profitable. He noted that she is not just a silly child, but well-trained and capable of handling it in such a place. When she replied that she can count and is literate, he told her not to play dumb. The girl didn't understand why he was offering this, but he added that it is beneficial for both of them. He will get his part, and she will earn hers. The girl admitted that she had never before taken responsibility for someone else's work. She warned that if she didn't finish on time, she wouldn't return the money. The guy agreed and suggested returning 1% of the borrowed amount in points. She was fine with that. He reminded her that the deadline was by tomorrow and asked if she understood how her skill worked. The girl confidently replied that yes, she understood. The girl agreed and addressed him, calling him master. He asked her to choose a skill, and she immediately activated the ability. The command skill transfer was given, after which the activation process began. She loudly shouted a phrase, confirming the execution of the order, and brought the ability into effect. After activating the ability, the voice in her head introduced itself as Marge. She said it out loud, confirming what she heard. The girl explained that Marge is the name of an entity that seems to be able to perform the function of additional assistance. She took what she heard seriously and reacted reservedly to the new name inside her. Shizuku stated her name, and the voice in her head noted that it was a good one. After that, she confirmed that she was indeed called Shizuku and activated the ability. The skill Long-Lasting Strength, designed specifically for her, was chosen. The activation was completed successfully, and now she had the opportunity to use this enhanced skill for an extended period. Shizuku was surprised when she received a gift as a sign of friendship, a sweet treat that she immediately appreciated. After that, she was informed that along with the skill, she was also given points that would significantly extend the duration of the ability. Her skill is now called Enduring Power. Then, reminding her of the goal, the interlocutor asked if she had rested well and was ready to continue. One of the characters asked in bewilderment why the master was demanding money from Shizuku, as he could have helped her for free. However, in response, he saw her run off to work with a proud and determined look. Despite her shabby appearance, it became clear that she possessed inner dignity and was not the type to easily accept help just like that. One of the characters asked the master if it was really Shizuku and expressed surprise that she might have already finished the work. He noted that the bags were heavier than the girl herself, but she still went to collect her earned money. Someone called her a wolf cub, noting her perseverance. Despite the late hour, everyone acknowledged her determination. The skill effect will remain active for another 10 days. Marge was tasked with finding additional work, as thanks to her, everything was completed much faster. They discussed that Shizuku could find a job much better than her current one, as she is not only strong but also literate. If everything continues in the same spirit, she will quickly master the necessary skill. Someone suggested looking for a more suitable occupation for her. Then they were reminded of the promised 600 yen, and one of the heroes said goodbye, saying "see you later." Everything happened against the backdrop of recognizing her potential and the desire to help her achieve more. The heroes were about to leave, having decided that they had taken everything necessary, and one of them asked if anything else was needed. However, their attention was distracted by something unexpected. Shizuku. Someone remarked in surprise at her presence in this place, not understanding why she was there and what she was doing in such an environment. In the bar, Artur complained that they might starve to death since they didn't receive the reward for the boss. One of them relayed a message from Gordon. His legs were heavy, and this was indeed confirmed. Everyone was irritated. They didn't understand why Bar survived and managed to report to the guild, as if he alone completed the dungeon and left everyone else lying poisoned. Someone started arguing. After all, he was told to run to the guild, and now they are accusing him while sitting and drinking. One of the adventurers said that soon they would have to leave someone else behind, hinting at difficulties. They discussed why the guild had summoned them. It turned out that rumors had reached them about the capture of a magical creature in the darkness, in a place where people had not been before. One was delighted that they could now talk about their skills. Upon hearing that it was about the wife of Duke Abig, someone firmly stated that they would not deviate from the path and would definitely reach rank S. Everyone happily received the news. Luck was finally on their side. The adventurers discussed that prestige was not the only thing important to them. They were proud of the successes of the Silver Blade of the Gods team, which had already handled S-rank dungeons. One of them emphasized that not a single weakling should be allowed in the party. They hoped to forge strong ties with Duke Abig, a powerful nobleman who owned this city. Everyone agreed that they had done the right thing by getting rid of Marge. They expected the Duke to support their path of strength. It was also mentioned that skills first appeared in this area, a place created by the efforts of people from different clans. The character hesitated, unwilling to fully reveal the truth, and said that a story about his holy blade would suffice. He noted that this sword was unlike others, and everything happening seemed strange to him. Recalling the angel wings, he remarked that Arthur also did not mention anything about them. Meanwhile, he ordered Seika and a meat platter. Inwardly, he addressed Marge, remembering how their guild once rose from poverty, like a nest reaching the heavens. He promised not to let their team fall apart, wherever Marge might be now. The price of the skill borrowed from Marge was excessive strain on the body. It surpassed ordinary human perception, possibly even approaching divine speed. The Holy Sword of Artora was created specifically for acceleration, and with it, his movements reached almost light speed. However, after 10 minutes, he would lose the Eagle Eye skill, making its use dangerous and time-limited. He was surprised by the unexpected appearance of Marge and Shizuku, and not understanding what was happening, he anxiously asked, "Master, what is this?" He explained that this root vegetable is used as a reserve in case of famine, but in its current state, it is contaminated with poison and has become dangerous. If you take a few, they will start to rot right in your hands because they are poisoned. They can be cleaned, but this requires clean water. However, the water used for washing the body is not suitable. He suggested that Shizuku does not have the appropriate water. The poison gradually dissolves in the liquid, and if the root vegetable is left in clean water for a long time, it can be eaten without consequences. He noticed that Shizuku was eating a poisonous root vegetable, which indicates how hungry she is. It's surprising, as she received her salary quite recently. However, there is only murky water around, and she doesn't even have enough money for bread. In such conditions, this root vegetable can become even more dangerous. He instructs Koei to keep an eye on Shizuku while he plans to go to her employer, assuming that she might have sick parents or something similar. Yet, he begins to suspect that something is not right with her salary. He claims that he has already paid Shizuku 600 yen, although he initially promised 3,000. This raises suspicion, as from the words of eyewitnesses, it becomes clear that he did not intend to pay the full amount from the start. He justifies himself by saying that he cannot pay that much, otherwise he would not be a merchant, and instead adds more work for her, extending the term by another 5 days. Moreover, he deducts 1,500 for accommodation. Although she completed everything in 1 day thanks to her skill, he continues to reduce the payment, citing damaged bags. Instead of the promised 3,000 yen, Shizuku received only 600. The food, for which 300 yen was deducted, turned out to be ordinary leftovers. The hostess had thought of everything in advance. She reduced the payment, added days, and deducted for imaginary damage. Therefore, the girl had to eat poisonous roots, as she had no other choice. Even these 600 yen she received only because she worked hard. Everything was arranged cleverly and calculatingly. The author considers this the best discovery, predicting a similar fate for others. They could have paid Shizuku the full amount, as she really manages to do the work in just 1 day. However, one of them points out that she is, after all, a wolf cub, and implies that paying such a creature a normal salary is pointless. No matter how well she works, for him it's the same as paying a clown. This dismissive attitude reveals hidden discrimination and bias against her. He begins to realize the essence of what is happening and recall the past. Previously, he did not understand why even those close to him tried to kill him. Now, having seen a person who looks like him, he seems to have received an answer. The thought that his appearance or nature could have been the cause of hatred suddenly becomes obvious. This moment shows how, through reflection in another, he came to a painful but important realization. He realizes the full depth of the betrayal. Not only was he expelled, but they didn't even intend to pay him, as if he was worth nothing. Perhaps his past weakness gave rise to ridicule, or plans to get rid of him. Now he clearly understands from the very beginning they had an intent, either to force him to leave or to kill him. This is not a mistake, but a deliberate betrayal. He feels that all this not only caused pain, but also destroyed his faith in people and justice. This thought had been growing inside him for a long time, but now it has become obvious and bitter. He reflects on the people who have always existed in this world, those who are incapable of empathy or understanding. They look at others with disdain, ignoring appearances, suffering, or the environment around them. They are not even concerned with their own benefit if an opportunity to destroy arises. Such people walk the path of darkness, where there is no light or purpose, only chaos, pain, and destruction, as if this is the only thing that brings them satisfaction. He speaks of those who unite for profit, not out of friendship or mutual understanding, but to steal, exploit, and destroy. Such people find a common goal only to justify their actions. They easily exploit the kind and naive, hiding behind false concern. But in this case, it is different. This is a misunderstanding caused by a person being blinded, their vision clouded. He thanks for the understanding and notes, "This is how the wise act." It has become an important lesson for him, which he has finally understood. The interlocutor abruptly ends the conversation about Shizuku, derogatorily calling her a little dog, and demands payment for the lesson, indicating that for him, everything is about calculation and profit. He no longer wants to discuss morality, justice, or compassion. When asked to talk about his kept people, he reacts suspiciously, hinting at the strange interest of the interlocutor. The atmosphere becomes tense. He demands to extend a hand, and says that no one gets anything for free. Then he activates a certain technique called tearing the celestial, hinting at a threat or demonstration of power. When he swung his hand to catch the coin, the blade hidden in the coin's flight severed his hand with incredible precision. The severed hand fell to the ground, and blood spurted to the side. The attacker did not immediately realize what had happened. Only when he saw his stump and the palm lying nearby did he comprehend the attack. The coin spun in the air, embedding itself into the wall with such force as if it were a throwing knife. The silence was pierced by a dull moan of pain and fury. While he sat in the chair, staring in horror at the bloody stump instead of his hand, his body gradually lost strength. His eyes became clouded, his breathing became intermittent, and he began to slowly sink to the floor. At that moment, Darj swiftly ducked down, precisely timing the moment, and carefully picked up the coin from the ground. His movements were silent and precise, and not a single emotion flickered on his face. He took the second coin and mockingly raised it to eye level. "Look, here is exactly as much as you should have paid Shizuku. These are your favorite coins?" His voice was calm but cold. He stepped closer to the sprawled body and tossed the coin in front of it. "What's the matter? Take them," he said, leaning forward. His gaze was icy, without the slightest sympathy, and an oppressive silence hung in the air. He screamed in panic, not believing what had happened. Seeing the severed hand, he asked what had been done to him. Darj calmly replied as if nothing special had happened. He started to scream in pain, but Darj only reminded him what Shizuku had eaten today, poisonous root vegetables. He emphasized that he knew all about it, while it hadn't even occurred to his interlocutor to inquire about such things. Darj understood that for people like this man, Shizuku was just a toy. There are those who understand nothing except through force. He was going to show him his own actions on his own body. It's useless to talk to such people. But Shizuku, even with her granted skill, was not going to contradict. She would rely only on herself to the end. Werewolves are proud creatures, and legends are made about them. And despite everything, she decided to keep her promise. The enraged man shouted that werewolves are not human, they have neither pride nor dignity, and there is no need to pay them. He declared that he would do everything himself, and no one should dare to tell him how to deal with the likes of Shizuku. But Darj calmly retorted that he had the right to intervene, since the man had not paid the girl the promised money. This is the reason why he must be held accountable for his actions. The enraged Darj declared that he would save Shizuka because he himself had given her the skill, believing the words about payment. He mockingly emphasized that it didn't matter who she was, a human or a wolf. Since the deal was made, he had the right to take the money. Threateningly, he said he wouldn't kill the offender if he didn't resist. This became the price for deception, because due to that person's greed, his gift turned out to be useless and was not appreciated. Darj warns that if he dares to touch him again, he will not fare well. He reminds him how he lowered the price for the job from 3,000 yen to 600, and says that the offender still has a left hand and both legs, hinting that he can cut them off too. This is both a threat and a warning. For every injustice, there will be a price to pay, and he will not stop until justice is restored for Shizuku. Darge raised the severed hand and calmly stated that he had given Shizuku only 1/5 of what was promised. Then he added that he could turn his body into the same parts. He coldly promised not to worry. He would heal him again and again, just to repeat the process endlessly. These words sounded like a cruel sentence, a painful punishment for betrayal and deceit, which he intended to carry out without mercy. People anxiously discussed what was happening, trying to understand what was going on. Everyone saw how Darge forcefully pushed him out of the window, and now both were on the first floor. The fallen one lay on the ground trying to crawl away, struggling to get up, and Darge, standing with his arms crossed high, silently looked down at him. His gaze was cold and overwhelming, leaving no hope for mercy. Darge, still looking down from above, calmly spoke as if continuing the conversation. He reminded that he does not intimidate for power, but acts without bluffing. His voice was even, but there was a sense of threat in it. He noted that the victim might have already started to regret their actions. Then he added with irony, "Would it be wiser to just talk now, while only the right hand remains of the body?" The words sounded almost like an invitation, but concealed a stern warning. Shizuku brought Limzuku and tried to stop the tension, but noticed how the enemy's body began to recover. She was surprised to see the skill Blessing of the Fire Angel activate. The entire office was destroyed, and the events became visible from the street. However, Darge stated that all this would remain between them. While the tension did not subside, someone knocked on the door. A voice announced entry, and the situation became even more tense. Shizuku whispered in panic, "Oh, what will happen now?" Shizuku was asked how she felt, and she replied that she was fine. There was a little poison in her, the same one they had once borrowed. She returned the skill, Angel Wings, so she did not suffer serious harm. After thanking for the help, the group members moved on to the next stage. Darge said he got rid of the enemy's hand, and suggested starting over. He had hidden Shizuku underground in advance, even before the others went inside. The man acknowledged his mistake and unfairness towards Ms. Shizuku, realizing that he had never paid her the due share. Seeing coins worth 10,000 yen and even 100 yen among them, he was surprised and asked what had been done with them. In response, he was sternly reminded that it was now necessary to pay not only the share, but also to compensate for the treatment and the illegal contract extension. Upon learning the amount, he handed Shizuku a 10,000 yen coin and others worth 100 yen to settle the account. Shizuku was surprised when she received the payment. At first, it seemed too little to her, but then she realized the amount was even more than she expected. She honestly returned the excess, saying she did not want to resemble in any way the person who had deceived her before. Her words were calm and firm. She only strives for justice. This action clearly demonstrated her honor and principles, despite everything she had to endure. Darge silently accepted the coin and activated the skill 6 Arms of Ashura, after which additional phantom limbs burst from his back. He directed them at the damaged areas of the office, and they began to restore right before his eyes. The ceiling, walls, and furniture were reassembling back to their original state. He noticed that the building itself was unharmed, and, with a touch of calm, remarked that he would now take care of the repairs. Fortunately, he had the means and strength for it. He clenched a coin in his palm, standing in the center of the ruined room. Behind him, 6 translucent arms of Ashura slowly rose, each tensely extended outward. His voice sounded cold and confident. "Choke on it." The coin forcefully tore from his hand and, whistling through the air, flew straight into the opponent's forehead. The metal embedded itself into the skin with a dull sound, as if sticking directly into the skull. From the impact, the body swayed backward, eyes widened in shock and pain. The coin didn't just strike, it seemed to grow in, pulsating with energy. Behind the figure, the 6 arms of Ashura still shimmered. As a reminder, this was only the first step of retribution. The coin was still sticking out of his forehead, and, staggering, he fell to his knees, clutching his head. The groan turned into a scream, muffled, distorted by pain. Darge, looking down at him, calmly said, "We're even." The scream intensified, turning into an inarticulate wail. The face contorted in agony. The air around trembled with tension. The last breath escaped from his chest, and the body settled on the floor, quietly subsiding in complete helplessness. Darj turned, looking at the sprawled body, and slowly exhaled. His voice sounded calm but firm. "Now we owe each other nothing." He approached the door without looking back and added, "There is no need for you to come to me for anything." Pausing for a moment at the exit, he threw one last word. "Farewell." Then he left, leaving behind only silence and the hum of the destroyed office. Duran struggled to his feet, wiping blood from his forehead where a coin had stuck. His face was contorted with pain and anger. He was breathing heavily, unable to believe what had happened. One of his subordinates ran up worriedly, but Duran only growled in response. He repeated the words he had just heard and clenched his fists in fury. Then he shouted, demanding that Overseer Eldoro be summoned immediately. Unable to come to terms with the humiliation, the girl suggested to Shizuka to go shopping and tidy herself up, reminding her that their salary had already been returned. Hearing about clothes, Shizuka became embarrassed, but her companion firmly noted that one cannot walk around in rags forever. She added that first, they needed to wash, although for this, unfortunately, they would have to part with the master's scent. After receiving her salary, the girl suggested that Shizuku buy new clothes and tidy herself up. They chose a simple yet elegant dress that emphasized her fragility. Then they went to the bathhouse, where the girl helped Shizuku wash away the dirt and fatigue. She carefully washed her hair and warmly cared for her body. There was genuine care in these actions. After everything, Shizuku looked renewed, clean, calm, as if she had shed the weight of the past, and for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Shizuku, wearing a new dress and having styled her hair, looked different. Gracefully, girlishly beautiful. Ko, noticing the change, said with surprise and genuine admiration that she had become completely different. Sweet, feminine. Shizuku, slightly embarrassed by the compliments, tried to hide her awkwardness with her usual masculine tone, still referring to herself in the masculine gender. But even in this, it was evident. She had begun to accept herself in a new way, allowing a little more softness and acceptance into her life. Shizuku asked a little embarrassedly if the new clothes suited her, as if not fully believing in the changes. Her companions laughed and assured her that it was just a joke. After all, the dress really accentuates her cute face. One of them admitted that they chose this dress not for practicality, but because it looks beautiful on her. Shizuku, still not used to such attention, reacted habitually gruffly, but a hint of joy flashed across her face. She felt truly beautiful. Shizuku, hearing that someone really liked her new clothes, quietly thanked them, not hiding her slight embarrassment. Her interlocutor, noticing the change in her behavior, decided to ask why she endured her previous owner, since with such strength she could have easily defeated him. He did not understand why she did not try to fully defend herself, her money, her freedom. Shizuku calmly replied that if she had fought back then, perhaps there would have been nothing left to eat afterward. The wolfman never uses force for personal gain. That is his principle. A salary, even if honestly earned, should not serve only oneself. Therefore, no matter the opponent or how difficult the situation seemed, Shizuku did not allow herself to use force for selfish reasons. She chose patience and endurance because, for her, honor is more important than victory, and justice is not something that can be measured by money or power. Shizuku confidently said that she uses her power only when someone is truly in danger or needs her help. There was no doubt in her voice, only firmness and sincerity. Hearing this, Darj looked at her with respect and thought that Shizuku was strong. Not only physically, she has an inner strength that cannot be broken even by difficulties or injustice. Darj noted to himself that Shizuku is truly strong. Even if she has to survive in the most difficult conditions, she will not give up. His interlocutor agreed and reminded him that Shizuku is a wolf person, and members of her kind have always been known for their pride and resilience. Darj respectfully acknowledged her dignity, and Shizuku confirmed. If someone needs her help, she will not hesitate to use her strength for that person. Darj became alert, sensing something alarming in the air. His sensitivity allowed him to recognize the approach of a large group of people, not ordinary passers-by, but armed men, about 40 of them, clad in armor. Their steps were coordinated, like those of soldiers, and they were led by one person whose presence elicited an especially strong response from him. Darj frowned, clenching his fists, and looking ahead, he spoke as if confirming his fears. It was Shizuku's former master. He had not come alone. He had brought a squad with him to take revenge. Perhaps the desire to regain lost power or a thirst for vengeance drove him to this reckless act, but now the threat could no longer be ignored. Darj turned sharply, sensing the approach of a threat. His instincts did not fail him. An armed group was heading towards them. He immediately understood who it was. Shizuku's former master had come for revenge, bringing with him about 40 soldiers in armor. Darjier clenched his fists, fury evident in his gaze. He looked at Shizuku, who stood beside him with a determined face. Without unnecessary words, he understood that they would fight together. He wanted to be by her side, not only at this moment but beyond. They both knew. Kindness cannot be forgotten. Together they were ready to fight back. Shizuku stood calmly, but inside everything was boiling. Before the fight, Darj suggested using the sustained strength skill, hoping it would be enough. She just shook her head and confidently replied that everything would be fine. The girl next to her worriedly noted that Shizuku only had 2 skills, and the fight could be truly dangerous. However, she knew Shizuku's true strength was not in leg reinforcement, but in her resilience and spirit. This is what would make her dangerous to enemies, despite her apparent weakness. Shizuku grimly looked towards the approaching threat. Darj quietly mentioned that he had heard about her, about who she really was, a legend. He knew that her power became stronger the longer she used the skill, but also that the limit was only 10 seconds. She turned away, saying that her power was not that complicated, especially if opponents didn't know who they were dealing with. He asked if she would show her true power, but Shizuku only clenched her fists. She was uncomfortable that someone had found out. She never wanted others to know about it. That's why she had been hiding it all this time. And then Shizuku took a step forward, spread her arms as if she wanted to embrace the sky itself, and closed her eyes. The wind gently stirred the hem of her new clothes. Her voice sounded deep and solemn, as if echoing from somewhere in the past, as if not only her lips were speaking, her blood spoke, her roots spoke. She uttered, addressing the void, "Spirits of the ancestors, endow your descendants with strength." At that moment, the air around her trembled, and the earth seemed to respond, barely noticeably reverberating underfoot. The awakening of something ancient was approaching. The full activation began with a barely perceptible sound, as if nature itself held its breath. In the next moment, a faint glow flared around Shizuku. Her endemic skill werewolf shell awakened in full. Her body was enveloped in a translucent shield of energy, taking on a beastly form. Shadows of claws grew from her back. Teeth gleamed, and her facial features sharpened. A primal light flared in her eyes. This was the very power that legends were made of, the power of her lineage, the power bestowed by the spirits of her ancestors. And then Shizuku jumped up, her body flaring with wild energy that made the ground tremble. A rumble echoed around, and with a powerful wave, she swept everything away. Stone slabs cracked, the air thickened with pressure, and the nearby houses crumbled like toys. The activity level suddenly spiked to 10, the maximum, dangerous even for trained mages. The soldiers recoiled in horror. One of them shouted, unable to believe his eyes, "Hey, you! What the—" But he didn't have time to finish. Shizuku's power engulfed everything. Shizuku, standing before them with her shoulders squared and fury in her eyes, silently raised her hands. They were no longer bound. Her voice sounded firm and cold. She asked why they needed Marge, money, the girl, or their lives. In response, mocking laughter was heard from the crowd, as if to say, she came herself, so they would take everything. One of the soldiers shouted that they came for everything, calling her a damn mutt. The laughter and shouts subsided when the aura around Shizuku began to thicken. They still did not understand who they were dealing with. Shizuku took a step forward, her eyes flashing with determination. She said she would also show them everything she was capable of, and coldly added not to delay. One of the attackers, smirking, leaped forward, confident in his speed and strength, but before he could even blink, Shizuku darted toward him like lightning. Her legs, quick and hardened, closed the distance in an instant. With a light jump, she was in front of him and, restraining her strength, delivered a precise blow, sending him flying. Before the others realized what had happened, she quietly said, "Allow me to teach you a few lessons." Shizuku delivered a crushing blow without hesitation, with such force that the opponent was thrown back and blood spurted from his mouth. The man's body fell to the ground with a dull thud, and a dead silence hung around. She straightened up, looking at the others, and calmly, almost indifferently, said, "First." There was neither anger nor fear in her voice, only cold determination. Shizuku could no longer hold back the accumulated emotions. Resentment, fatigue, pain burst out, and she attacked her opponents with fury, but without cruelty. One by one they fell. The first, the second, the third, the fourth. Darge watched from the sidelines and thought, why doesn't she use her claws? It could have been easier. Or is it her mercy? Not to kill, but simply to show that she can no longer be treated this way. Shizuku stood among the fallen enemies, barely containing the storm of emotions that had accumulated over all this time. She did not use her claws, not because she couldn't, but because she consciously refused excessive cruelty. Each of her strikes was precise and calculated, without hatred, but with cold determination. Darge silently observed the proceedings, pondering, is this an expression of mercy or inner pain? One of the opponents, lying on the floor, asked in a trembling voice why he was treated this way. There was no response. In Shizuku's eyes there was no rage, but a deep, almost calm sense of justice. For her, it was not revenge, but retribution. And more than anything, she wanted no one ever to dare treat others the way she had once been treated. Nevertheless, the reason Shizuku remained silent was most likely because she had no power, neither over the situation nor over herself. Being beaten, defeated, exploited, this had become her usual state. Her kindness, her noble patience, all of this only reinforced others' belief that she was weak. There are people who do not appeal to strength, do not raise their voices, and do not demand justice because they have already resigned themselves internally. Perhaps Shizuku simply did not understand what was happening to her. Her silence is not agreement, it is lostness. But in the eyes of others, she remained only a fool, too soft to fight back. Shizuku, despite fatigue and the biased opinions of those around her, rose from the cold ground and delivered a precise blow without hesitation. Her movement was swift, like a gust of wind, yet strong enough to cut through the opponent's body. What seemed like weakness turned into hidden power. Those who considered her useless now watched with wide eyes, unable to look away from the spectacle. It was not for the faint-hearted. She stood aside, watching what was happening, and couldn't believe her own eyes. For the first time in her life, she saw something like this. She was ready to intervene if the situation got out of control. But everything turned out differently. Without her divine eye, she could barely grasp the essence of what was happening. Shizuku's power seemed impossible to comprehend. The acceleration with which she moved completely defied the laws of physics. She realized that her ability was not just a talent, but a rare endemic skill that went beyond common sense. It was both frightening and mesmerizing at the same time. It is not surprising that skills acquired only from books often turn out to be naive and limited. What Shizuku demonstrated could not be called an ordinary skill. It was truly a special, rare gift. Such abilities are found only in certain individuals in strictly defined regions, and even the most experienced mages and warriors cannot always grasp them. Our knowledge intersected. After all, she saw the world through my eyes, but this did not make us equals. Ordinary skills are available to anyone who makes an effort. Unique ones, however, are born from the very essence of a person, their character, beliefs, inner core. It is precisely such abilities that I am able to recognize with my divine eye. Once upon a time, a mysterious stream of energy known as mana appeared in the world. It doesn't just float in the air, but moves like a living organism, exploring, interacting with its surroundings. Mana is particularly interested in certain groups of beings with the potential for unusual abilities. This stream of power does not stand still. It constantly glides across continents, studying the terrain, reacting to the climate, altering nature. Sometimes its presence manifests as extreme heat, bursts of magical activity, poisonous plants, awakened dragons, or suddenly formed magical veins. In such places, those capable of awakening unique skills are most often born. Their mana is not just energy but a reflection of their individuality. That is why these skills cannot be copied. They are like fingerprints of the soul. In this very place, steeped in ancient mana, a skill of unparalleled power was born. It was the skill of the Earth Spirit, a mysterious ability rooted in the very soil where energy was born and grew generation after generation. Its source is the Earth's mana, thick, heavy, filled with ancient memories. Once, the king of this land was closely connected with the history of werewolves, creatures that knew no fatigue, whose nature was indomitable. They were strong in body and spirit, fast and resilient. And the longer the battle lasted, the more noble and fierce the werewolves became, as if the very spirit of the earth flowed into their bodies, enhancing every movement, every heart. It was from this connection with the earth, memory, and blood that a unique skill was born, passing the strength of the past to those who are worthy. Shizuku's unique skill is the Fanged Wolf. It not only enhances her body, it awakens in her the primal fury of an ancient lineage whose veins once pulsed with the earth's mana. Upon activation, her power level instantly reaches 905, a figure unattainable for most beings. In this state, Shizuku becomes unstoppable. Her movements are as swift as lightning, and her strikes are precise and devastating. No one can defeat her while she fights. A power bordering on the absolute, and in every roar, every step, every glance, one thing is clear. This is a fight to the end, and she will not retreat. Shizuku stood in the center of the empty hall, surrounded by tense silence. Her body trembled not from fatigue, but from the seething power within. Someone among the observers barely whispered the word return, but the voice sounded uncertain and immediately got lost. The master frowned, catching the sharp change in her state. He watched her with concern, understanding that Shizuku was provoking herself too much, immersing in the flow of power that was becoming less controllable with each passing second. It no longer resembled the restrained warrior she once was. He couldn't believe that such words could be uttered by her. However, no one dared to approach. The tension was growing. Although outwardly Shizuku remained calm, her gaze betrayed the danger of a force capable of destroying everything around. He did not know what kind of life Shizuku would lead. Her thoughts seemed hidden behind an impenetrable wall, so deep that it was impossible to grasp their essence. He knew too little about her. They had only recently met. All he could do was observe and wonder. Why did she come to this city? What does she need? What drives her? There were no answers yet, only guesses, and a troubling premonition. With these words, she literally pierced the space like thunder tearing through silence. In Shizuku's eyes, fury intertwined with pain blazed. The activity level of her body rapidly increased, and upon reaching the mark of 4064, it began to suppress everything around. The air trembled, the ground vibrated. Everyone nearby felt an overwhelming pressure. There was no doubt. Shizuku demanded the return of something precious, possibly lost forever. Her name, her essence, her humanity. And dignity. The time spent, everything that rightfully belonged to her, everything that was taken without permission. She demanded it back not with words, but with the very essence of her being. The air thickened, as if the world held its breath. At that moment, Darge and Koei, standing nearby, simultaneously activated the cosmic jump, a light impulse, a distortion of space, and they disappeared from the battlefield. He turned to Koei, saying it was time to move out. "Yes, master," she responded. Darge assumed that she would manage on her own from there. When the man who had lost his arm finally appeared, Darge and Shizuku were already standing in front of him. He struggled to lift his gaze. Two figures loomed before him, calm and confident, as if everything that was happening had been planned long ago. Darge tilted his head to the side, as if examining his prey with interest, and coldly smirked. He didn't need to shout. His voice sounded threatening on its own. He reminded the man of the arm hidden underground, of the pain, humiliation, and helplessness. The man tried to say something, but only fragments of words came out. He hadn't expected these two to still be here. He hadn't expected them to be waiting for him, down below, on the ground, with cold gazes that no longer held any doubt. He suddenly felt something strange under the floor, as if an emptiness or a hidden hole, skillfully concealed in the structure of the building. His heart beat faster. That was exactly where he had hidden his severed hand. Without delay, he activated the cosmic jump, intending to teleport directly to the cache. However, Darj had calculated everything in advance. Using the skill of touch, he knew exactly where he would try to escape. When the space around him trembled, Shizuku calmly warned, "If you make a mistake, even by a fraction of a degree, you could crash into stone and die." Panic flickered in his eyes, but it was already too late. He was deftly intercepted. Not maliciously, but cold-bloodedly, like those who had long since put an end to it. Shizuku was incredibly strong now. The strength in her body was enough to destroy the entire house, down to the foundation with a single swing. Her presence felt like an oppressive wave of pressure that instinctively made one want to flee, but there was nowhere to go. The hero, threatened by her power, tried to mock the situation, calling them a, quote, bunch of virtues. Yet fear was evident in his every movement. He abruptly asked if anyone was seriously going to defend him, but in response, he heard only the cold truth. Hide underground. You die. Go somewhere else. There's death there too. These are not mercenaries, not faceless killers for hire. These are people driven by something else. Justice, anger, pain. And if Shizuku reaches him, she will cross the line, commit a crime. But this was the outcome that suited Darja the most. He couldn't believe his eyes. The very girl he considered a nobody was now standing right in front of him, and her presence was literally pressing on his chest. He recoiled and exclaimed in panic, not hiding his horror. Darj, observing the situation, stepped forward, remaining icy and composed. His calmness sounded more dangerous than threats. When an attempt was made to speak, he responded dryly, calling the interlocutor a joker, and immediately ordered him to stand still, not moving. His voice brooked no objections. He reminded them about the lost arm and stated that he could even restore that. Regardless of the condition, he would heal. But first, silence and complete submission. She froze, listening to the faint pulse of mana in the air, and finally confidently declared, "Found it." The level of activity jumped to a terrifying mark, almost 90,000. The air trembled. There was no doubt in her gaze. She stepped forward directly towards the enemy and said firmly, without hesitation, "I won't let you just die like that. I told you, I will save you." Somewhere behind, a scream was heard, as if someone realized they could no longer escape. But she did not waver. 3 days have passed. The day began calmly, but the tension in the air was growing. One of the fighters, after examining himself, muttered with relief that everything seemed to be in order. At this time, someone noticed Marge silently preparing to leave. She was fastening her cloak with an expression of complete determination. She was asked if she was going somewhere, but she did not answer. In another corner, someone whispered, "This person is already the 14th, and he spoke to me." The day after Shizuku dealt with Garen and his gang, the whole city was buzzing. 40 bodies of mercenaries were found, and this shocked the residents. Everyone was agitated, discussing what had happened. Rumors quickly spread throughout the city. Supposedly, Garen himself declared war on one of the adventurers and was then killed. People whispered in the streets, in taverns, in markets. The story became a legend even before all the details were known. Shizuku did not go unnoticed on the streets. After the events with Garen, people began to recognize her. Passersby tried to talk to her, asked questions, admired her, or simply stared from a safe distance. Some children shouted after her, asking if she had a boyfriend or if she really destroyed a building on her own. Some whispered about her divine power that could wipe everything off the face of the earth. Most spoke of her with respect, albeit cautious. There were also those who simply drew closer, attracted by rumors and someone else's bravery. Even the weather that day seemed to emphasize the special atmosphere. And Shizuku, surrounded by attention, was in no hurry to leave. Everyone already knew about her exploits too, and even the old man, who once wielded influence, now only elicited contempt. After defeating Guran, Shizuku discovered a large amount of money and valuables in his estate. She didn't immediately know what to do with such wealth and felt awkward, as if she had done something wrong. She was particularly troubled by the money, the kind that previously belonged to a criminal. But Darge reminded her, property comes in different forms, and Guran had come to this city with the intention of taking away the locals' own resources. Given that, justice was on their side. In the end, they took not only the cash, initially planning to take just a few $100,000, but also something more significant. They even acquired the brilliant estate, along with documents, real estate, and access to resources that previously fueled the criminal network. After the events with Guran and his gang, the conversation in the town turned to money. The locals discussed that a mid-level adventurer usually earns about 50,000 in, whereas the daily wage of a regular worker is 10,000. The total amount received after the conflict was about 631,000 in, which sparked lively interest. One of the townspeople asked Darge how much he earned when he was in the guild. He reluctantly admitted that despite his status as a mid-level adventurer, he was assigned particularly difficult tasks that paid more than usual. Moreover, constant travel and battles required considerable expenses, both physical and financial. He decided to stay and spend all the money he received right here in Kanui. Despite the city looking lively, the population barely numbered 100 people. He understood that simply taking a large sum out of such a place could collapse the local economy. In the current situation, it would be foolish to manage the money thoughtlessly. It was much more sensible to reinvest it back into the city, at the very least as a deposit asset, preparing for possible major opportunities or even future disasters. He did not lack funds, and therefore believed that sometimes money itself creates value. The question is only where and how to use it. Shizuku shook her head, as if brushing away her own thoughts. She couldn't imagine how she could have any good memories associated with this city. Everything that happened here was steeped in pain, loss, and selfishness, including her own. But she knew that someone nearby understood her, and that provided comfort. Darge, observing her, calmly noted that she was strong in spirit, even if she didn't realize it herself. He thanked her for her sincerity and then gently added that she shouldn't worry so much about the past. Shizuku stood confidently, clenching her fists. She said she was going to live as before, not allowing the past to change her essence. Without further ado, she activated the skill of Cosmic Leap. It was necessary to move forward. One villain caused too much inconvenience to other people, and this was what disgusted her. She believed that thinking about one's own well-being was not shameful, especially if it helps others. When Darge started talking about his choice, Shizuku interrupted him and firmly stated that if necessary, she would think about how to make him happy herself. He replied that she understood nothing, to which she quietly asked if he was angry and why. The three of them found themselves in front of a modest but well-kept building. The sign above the entrance read, Lino Jewelry Store. One of them asked again, confirming if this was the right place. The other nodded, yes, this is the jewelry store. They stood in front of an expensive building, the facade of which immediately indicated prestige, a jewelry store, one of the few in the city. Such places were in high demand, as precious stones were valued more than gold. Around Kinui, there were many similar shops, and spending 700,000 yen here was a piece of cake, despite the modest size of the city. One of them doubted aloud that they might not even be allowed to the doorstep. Another, looking at Shizuku, asked if it was her first time here. She just nodded, not taking her eyes off the display windows. When they entered the store, they were greeted by the ring of the doorbell and the soft light reflecting off the jewelry displays. One of the companions called out, "Yes, yes, I'm coming," as if addressing someone inside. Shizuku stopped at the entrance, looking around. One of them chuckled and asked if the owner was present. Footsteps were heard from the back of the hall, and then a voice said, "Welcome." Shizuku widened her eyes in surprise when she realized that the gift was also intended for her. "What? For me too?" she blurted out before she could restrain herself. The seller just nodded politely and asked if they wanted to order anything else. Darge, hesitating a bit, mumbled, "Well, can you make it for 3? The seller quickly calculated the amount. 7.47 million yen. That's quite a lot of money, he noted calmly, waiting for a response. The saleswoman in the store, noticing their interest, came closer and spoke calmly. She explained that the pendant was made from a rare stone that, according to legend, was worn by a princess. The stone is called Verwold. Shizuku was slightly surprised. The name seemed familiar to her. The saleswoman nodded, confirming the guess. It is a precious mineral with interesting properties. Inside it retains mana of warmth, and if you delve into the structure, you can notice a soft glow, similar to amethyst. The color and luster of the stone change, which is why it is often confused with other types. The saleswoman nodded wearily, confirming that it was indeed amber, albeit with a slightly different shade, and emphasized that it was non-returnable. She explained that the stone contained unique mana, which made the manifestation of endemic abilities with it quite natural. Upon hearing the names Marja and Shizuku, she immediately understood who was in front of her and noted that such artifacts are especially well suited for those who are half werewolf. According to her, money does not matter. She handed the pendant to Shizuku, saying that it now belonged to her, despite the high value of the stone. They left the jewelry store and turned into a deserted alley. Marge stopped, casting a quick glance at Shizuku, and after hesitating, said he wanted to talk. Inside, it was too uncomfortable. Too many unnecessary ears. Here, away from strangers, he struggled to express his gratitude, noticeably embarrassed. Shizuku looked at him in confusion, not immediately understanding what exactly he was thankful for, but still stayed by his side. In the alley where they were left alone, Shizuku suddenly started talking about her hometown. She said she grew up in a hidden village of werewolves, a small and secluded settlement where it's difficult to host a proper reception for guests. Nevertheless, she sincerely wanted Marge to come there and see where she was from. Shizuku, still a little embarrassed, admitted that she was not good at expressing her feelings beautifully, but wanted to thank Marge with something genuine. She told him about her homeland, a place called Ao Number Saihate. There, in her homeland, lies a rank S dungeon, the existence of which almost no one knows. This dungeon is unusual. It has a unique name, and its scale reaches more than 40 floors. Inside, one can attain the highest title, King. This is the place she wanted to show him as a token of gratitude. Shizuku, clasping his hand with both palms, looked into his eyes with desperate sincerity. Her voice trembled, but there was determination in it. She could no longer remain silent. The girl confessed that her village was in a critical situation and urgently needed help. She was not asking out of politeness. She was pleading from the bottom of her heart. Shizuku bowed her head, asking Marge to save those dear to her. At the same time, our tourist team was on the road. One of its members, with undisguised admiration, looked around at the luxurious carriage they were traveling in and exclaimed, stretching out the words in amazement. He noticed how one of the companions looked almost like an aristocrat, and teased with a smirk, saying that, in such an appearance, he was clearly not going monster hunting. Outside, it was fresh and pleasant, and the thought that the opportunity to ride in such a carriage might not come again made the trip particularly memorable. Another member nodded, sharing this feeling. In response, one of them laughed. Finally, you understand where your place is. One of the participants discussed the situation with anxiety. If they encounter that same opponent again, he will most likely run away with his tail between his legs. Their carriage, designed for 4, could actually accommodate 5, just right for a team of adventurers. Everyone was focused on controlling the dungeon to prevent a possible catastrophe. One of the S-class labyrinths was considered truly impregnable, and it was the existence of such places that led to the formation of adventurer guilds. For adventurers, it was a chance not only to advance but also to appear before aristocrats, earning respect or even a title. Subduing monsters in front of the nobility turned into a spectacle watched with interest, and the awarding of the title King became a tradition that attracted not only heroes, but also those who chased after fame and recognition. One of the participants enthusiastically said that he must track who will arrive at the place and what their plan will be. After all, he considered himself a real genius. To get ahead of the others, he ordered a carriage in advance, hoping to get there faster. Meanwhile, one of the companions noted that perhaps their behavior seemed a bit inappropriate, as Lord Beak himself would be observing the proceedings. A companion named Tina was noticeably nervous, but they tried to encourage her by reminding her that every member of their team experiences such anxiety. Upon learning that the journey to the place would take a whole day, he was surprised but quickly composed himself and enthusiastically suggested riding for a couple more days, if desired. He was confident he would participate in this event in any case. The carriage shook slightly on the bumps, and one of the passengers remarked that the shaking might intensify, but the driver confidently stated that the vehicle was built in full compliance with the requirements and wouldn't spill a drop of tea even on wasteland. However, one of the companions irritably shouted that they had apparently been deceived, calling the driver a creature. Nevertheless, he just laughed in response, asserting that there was nothing to worry about since they were already leaving the city, and added, ironically, that the tea in his carriage was the cheapest. Artura stated that due to the coachman's fault, he spilled alcohol on his new armor. The coachman, with a frightened voice, uttered apologies and loudly drew attention to the appearance of monsters, expressing concern that they were right on the main road. Wild boars indeed appeared on the road, which caused additional caution. With disdain, he called these creatures small fry and instructed Gordon to approach and check the situation. Gordon, feeling unwell, declined and apologized. Turning to Ilya, Artura noted that he didn't understand how she could sleep with such noise, but decided he was too lazy to wake her. He confidently stated that he could handle the situation on his own, as he was capable of defeating even 10 beasts of rank A, and now there were only 2 in front of him. He regretfully added that if he had an S rank, he would have destroyed them instantly without expending a drop of effort. After that, he activated a skill called the Holy Blade and prepared to attack. At the moment of impact, he was unexpectedly thrown back, as if the force had gotten out of control. After his attack, only 1 boar remained alive, and he himself felt a sharp pain. He was surprised that he could not detect the enemy's movement, despite his keen eagle eye. He noted that when using the Holy Blade, he should always clearly see the opponent, even at high speed. However, at that moment, he couldn't discern anything, and he concluded that perhaps he had overindulged in alcohol. Realizing his condition, Artura admitted that he was drunk, but now he had come to his senses and was obliged to destroy the remaining monsters. Reactivating the Holy Blade, he focused on the fight and was able to successfully kill the last boar. Despite this, his body was thrown back again, which caused irritation and anxiety. He shouted in rage, expressing dissatisfaction that the situation was repeating itself and could not understand the reason for what was happening. The words of Marge about the return of skills that surfaced in his memory caused an internal protest in him. He rejected this thought, repeating to himself that it was impossible and could not be true. At the same time, he clearly realized that he had to demonstrate his Holy Blade technique before Duke Abik. There was only 1 day left until the day of dedication, on which he was supposed to do this. In the arena, the man playing the role of the host informed the gathered audience that the participants of the Silver God's Blade would now perform and demonstrate their martial arts. He urged the audience to enjoy the fight in which the participants would break through the filthy, devilish abyss. In his thoughts, Arthur noted that he had received a rare chance to prove himself and realized that he had no right to fail. He emphasized how important it was to demonstrate a competent strategy for Dukabik to recognize his strength. His ambition to join the ranks of the aristocrats depended on a successful performance at this demonstration. The man in the arena continued, stating that the Blade of the Silver God would release the monsters offered by Artura, and that even for an A-rank squad, safety measures had been provided. Artura noted to himself that even without an eagle eye, one can hit vital organs, which will provide an advantage. He also reminded himself that the monsters he selected have a hard shell and will continue to fight even when decapitated. These monsters represented an army of ants numbering about 50 individuals. Gordon shouted to Artore, suggesting they first greet the audience before the battle began. He caught himself and thanked everyone who came to watch their fight against the monsters. He promised a spectacle of destruction, devastation, and an abundance of blood. After that, he quietly instructed his allies to remain silent and try to gather as many monsters as possible in one place. Gordon, somewhat fearfully, confirmed that he understood the instruction. The man in the arena gave the command to the participants of the Silver God's Blade to prepare, and announced the start of the martial arts demonstration, opening the cage with the monsters. Gordon activated the obsidian skill and cursed in frustration, realizing the seriousness of the situation. Artura confidently accepted the challenge, activated the Holy Blade, and rushed into battle. However, he was unexpectedly thrown back and hit the wall with a dull thud. The spectators, observing the events, reacted with surprise to the failure. Gordon addressed him with concern, not understanding what was happening and why Arthur could not fight. He himself, feeling the strangeness of what was happening, admitted that he might not be in his right mind and vowed that next time he would definitely not slip up. Activating the Holy Blade again, he tried to repeat the attack, but the result was the same. He was once again thrown aside. Gasping, he said he didn't understand what was happening and what exactly was going on. Tina, concerned by what she saw, uttered his name, wanting to intervene. The spectators in the crowd began to loudly discuss what was happening, wondering why Arturo was not succeeding, despite the strength of his blade skill. Someone among them reminded that the Eagle Eye skill was lent to Arturo by Marge, and perhaps now he should return it. However, it was immediately clarified that Marge lent completely different abilities, such as speed reading and magical power. In the crowd, it was recalled that he shared various skills with different people, including Lord Gordon, and even mentioned Arturo's debt to Tina in the amount of 10 gold coins. There was an opinion that after what was seen, it became obvious. Arturo lost the skill of the Eagle Eye, and this is precisely the reason for his failure. Someone confidently stated that the Holy Blade had lost its power and expressed shock, as it was impossible to believe. After all, it was about a member of the Silver God's blade. The crowd began to discuss that the blade of the Silver God was Marge's former party, and this fact proves that the entire strength of the team members was completely dependent on him. Gordon ordered Tina not to delay and to immediately restore Arthur using the Angel Feather skill. Tina stumbled, but still tried to use magic, uttering the activation Angel's Feather. The spell didn't work, and the girl, in a panic, confessed that she didn't understand why her power wasn't working, and what she might have done wrong. Gordon, losing patience, told her to stop crying and called for Arthur again. In response, he smiled faintly, noting that it seemed Elijah's wisdom had finally returned. Ilya intervened and categorically stated that this was not the case. Arthur looked at her in surprise, not understanding what she meant. Ilya explained that ancient magic is simply impossible at the moment, but promised to help and protect him here and now. She suggested using her saliva, claiming that it would help him recover. Arthur reacted with surprise and disbelief to her words, expressing a lack of understanding of what was happening. Gordon shouted loudly, calling on everyone to destroy the remaining enemies, but at that moment, his voice broke into a cry of pain. Fighters from the Class A squad and the Duke's army came to the rescue, who together neutralized the enemy. Thus, this unprecedented and difficult battle finally came to an end. Since that very meeting, full of bitterness and disappointment, a whole week has passed, filled with tense silence and a decline in spirit. Arturo was torn in thoughts, tormented by the question of why all this was happening to him, and found no solace in the surrounding silence. Ilya, assessing the situation, noticed that everything had indeed taken a catastrophic turn. No one had seen Tina for several days, and Gordon had not left his room all this time, as if plunged into deep despair. She wondered if things were really that bad. Arturo reported that a few days ago he sent a letter to the Duke requesting a personal audience, and if this appeal had been accepted and considered, then perhaps they would have had even the slightest ray of hope. Then he asked Ilya if the butler had come yet, and how much time had passed since then. Ilya, confused, tried to determine the time by the phases of the moon glancing at the sky, but ended up completely tangled in her own calculations. Suddenly, the butler appeared, announcing that he had come with a refusal on behalf of his master. He explained reservedly that his master was extremely outraged by the contents of the letter received from Arturo, and then politely asked to accept the refusal. Arturo could not contain his emotions, and demanded an explanation as to why the butler was returning the letter, as he had every right to know why everything had turned out this way. To this, the butler remarked with cold dignity that Arthur could be satisfied with rereading what he had written himself, as the reason for the refusal was contained in the text. He exclaimed with disbelief that, in his opinion, everything was in perfect order, and called the situation a betrayal. The butler remained unperturbed and clarified that Arturo seemed to be fine, however, he simply misunderstood the essence. The gentleman does not like unfounded conflicts. He is a reasonable and merciful person, and therefore even forgave Arturo's thoughtless act. This remark caused even greater anger in Arturo, and he noted that what was happening was beyond all reasonable limits, At that moment, Elia thought to herself that everything said was a lie. Meanwhile, the butler continued, specifying that Artur performed terribly, and must realize his current situation himself. However, in 2 or 3 months, he may try to send the letter again, and then their request might be considered. Artura couldn't believe what he heard, and wondered how a person could allow themselves to say such words. The butler, as if anticipating his feelings, explained that he understands human nature, and knows that Artura is not one to give up. However, he noted that the gentleman is convinced of Artura's wrongness. He said that he personally observed him, and saw how failures followed him step by step. And most importantly, Artur used a prohibited move twice. He was stunned, and asked again with surprise what this second instance meant. The butler confirmed that it was true. Artur used the forbidden skill of the Holy Blade twice. Artura was confused and began demanding explanations as to why this skill was considered forbidden, and accused Mr. Butler of a complete misunderstanding of the situation. The butler calmly explained that the Holy Blade represents a high-speed attack that cannot be caught by the human eye, and the result of such an attack is always obvious. Artura noted indignantly in his thoughts that he did not understand what was being discussed at all, and what nonsense was coming from the butler's mouth. Meanwhile, the butler calmly added that the use of such a skill entails punishments: prison, torture, gallows. It is for this reason that he came in person to report it. The gentleman does not wish to press charges for what was done. He understands that Artura is still too young, which is why he acts impulsively and does not think about the consequences for his own life. Artura, seizing the opportunity, begged to be given at least one chance. The butler, having considered his request, stated that if a natural disaster occurs, or there is an uprising or an act of disobedience, then Artura must report it to him immediately. He is obliged to control what is happening, and if this happens, they will meet in person. After these words, he apologized and left. Elia, left alone with Artura, sadly stated that they were completely denied, and now there was no hope left. Artura, overwhelmed with despair, exclaimed that this person was a real bastard who ruined everything. He admitted that it was a complete collapse, and everything fell apart precisely because of Marge. In his thoughts, he went over all the consequences of what had happened. Elia lost the ability to use magic, Tina lost her healing powers and disappeared without a trace, and Gordon survived but sustained serious injuries. And the army ants had battered his body and nervous system so much that he was temporarily paralyzed. Artur's chance to become a nobleman completely failed, and it all happened because of the Holy Blade. Clenching his fist in a surge of determination, he suddenly remembered the alchemist, the brilliant Angelina. Marja had already been thrown out of the equation, but not all was lost. Much could still be changed. Elia doubtfully reminded that they were forbidden to leave the city, and such an act could have serious consequences. However, Artura, boiling with inner determination, declared that he did not care about the aristocrat's opinion. He is convinced that the two geniuses must meet and will be able to solve all the accumulated problems. Artura believed that he would prove to everyone his strength as the sword of God, and they would be able to change everything. He mentally challenged those who claimed that he had a narrow outlook. Meanwhile, Angelica regretted not being able to arrive at the guild before sunset, but she promised herself that she would definitely be there tomorrow morning. She was filled with anticipation for the next day. She couldn't wait for the moment when she would finally meet the one they call the Sword of God. Marge reported the start of the loan repayment procedure related to the skill Duration Increase, which temporarily belonged to Shizuku. Shizuku regretfully prepared to part with the fully revealed wolf technique. However, Marge reminded her that the loan period expired today, but the technique itself was still active. He added that, if necessary, he could borrow the Duration Enhancement skill again. Shizuku noted that she could still use the wolf technique for 10 seconds. At that moment, Ko informed that the skill Duration Enhancement remained with Shizuku, and the current SP indicator was 1242. Shizuku was surprised, and Marge explained that this skill had become her own without any additional effort. Shizuku was confused and wanted to understand what it meant, and Marge promised to explain everything in more detail on the way to the next task. Meanwhile, an elderly man approached them, introducing himself as the mayor of Kinui. He asked Marge for a favor. Marge invited him in and inquired about the nature of the request. The mayor directly said that he wanted Marge to deal with the extermination of the monsters that had been surrounding Kinui in recent months and becoming increasingly aggressive. Marge noticed that they were also attacked by monsters along the way, which he put to sleep, approximately 80 individuals. The mayor continued. As a mayor, he was obliged to act, and therefore hired 40 mercenaries, but now they were all unconscious. Marge noted reservedly that it was their group with Shizuku that defeated those mercenaries that night. The mayor admitted that the blame lay with the mercenaries themselves, but emphasized that the threat from the monsters had not disappeared. Of all the mercenaries, only Marge remained standing. Ko turned to Marge, asking what she should do. Marge pondered and noted to himself that the task turned out to be unexpected, but it was not directly related to their original goal, saving the werewolf village. He addressed Shizuku, pointing out the unusually high number of monsters in the vicinity of Kinui, and suggested that it might be related to the labyrinth. Shizuku agreed with this version. Marge reasoned that if there were so many monsters, the journey to Makaibo would take at least 6 months. This indicated that low-level monsters were making their way to the surface. He concluded that even if they managed to capture the labyrinth itself, the monsters on the surface will not disappear. Therefore, he considered it necessary to clear the area as soon as possible, before any discussion of replacement could take place. He simultaneously activated the scout's intuition and the divine eye and determined that there were 104 bodies nearby, and among them were many monsters. At the same time, he noted that thanks to his skill, which ignored defense, the number of enemies did not matter. He uttered the word cutting, obviously activating the attack, and suggested continuing the conversation about skills on the way. After that, he asked an important question. How did Shizuku manage to study her skills? He explained that all of this was part of the skill acquisition mechanism. Shizuku asked again, mechanism. Marge began by explaining that the skill could only be applied on the condition that the user had at least 1,000 SP special points. Without this minimum amount, usage was impossible. To earn the first 1,000 SP, there was no easy way. It required constant learning, skill development, diligent training, and effort. This is exactly how he once acquired the skills that later began to be used as part of the Artora team. When the skill began to be used, SP gradually started to accumulate and strengthen. Some abilities developed only after reaching a certain threshold. According to Marge, his skill borrowing system directly depended on SP. Essentially, he was not just borrowing abilities, he was transferring SP. If a usage period of 10 or more days was established, he could transfer as many SP as he wanted. However, there was a strict limitation. It was possible to borrow skills from only one person, and only if that person truly possessed them. For example, if someone is given the skill of resistance, and this person had healing abilities, they would be able to apply resistance to other people as well. But even if someone possessed 100 million abilities, and another was transferred only 1,000 SP, the remaining 99,999,000 still had to be used personally. Of course, it would be convenient to give 1,000,000 SP to 100 people, creating a full-fledged army. But here too, conditions applied. The interest rate was 10% for a 10-day period. That is, having borrowed 1,000 SP, it was necessary to return 1,100. To develop a greater number of skills, it was required to apply them as often as possible. Shizuku cautiously asked what would happen if it was not possible to increase the number of SP. Marge replied that in such a case, a deduction would occur -100. This meant that there were also negative effects. If you borrow 1,000,000 SP, you had to earn 100,000 in 10 days. He reminded that the speed reading zone had been applied to more than 1.2 million people over 6 years, and with such figures, repaying the debt practically became impossible. He also mentioned the existence of a limit on negative SP. If this limit was reached, then the other SPs also began to deplete. He was surprised that there was even such a phenomenon as negative range in SP. He had not known about it before and preferred not to delve into it. Internally, he vowed not to take anything from Shizuku that would make a return impossible. He had set a minimum term, and it was for this reason that Shizuku needed to use the transferred abilities within 10 days. He inquired whether she now understood why the, quote, duration extension effect did not disappear even after the debt was paid off. Shizuku was a little surprised. Then Marge suggested that perhaps she used the wolf technique every time there was free time outside of battles. Shizuku replied that she tries to save SP, but she was interested in how long the transferred resource would last. Considering the use of the skill to increase duration, she accumulated 2,342 SP, and if 1,000 is returned, 1,242 will remain. Marge confirmed that everything is correct. Then Shizuku inquired about how things were going with other skills. However, Koei abruptly intervened in the conversation, rudely stating that paying off one debt with another is behavior characteristic only of foolish and uneducated people. Shizuku was a bit confused, and awkwardly admitted her mistake. Marge watched with interest Shizuku's reaction when she noticed that he might want something more than what he had already received. Shizuku, showing genuine curiosity, inquired about how convenient the demonstrated technique was and what it was called. Marge explained that it is not a separate skill, but a combination of 3 existing ones that he learned to manage simultaneously. Ko thoughtfully suggested the idea. What if such a skill existed independently? Marge agreed that in that case, it would be one of the most powerful skills. Just imagine how many different situations it could be useful in. However, he added that carrying all the collected materials on his back would be very heavy and frightening. He thanked Ko for her help, and she in turn happily noted that she was glad to be of assistance. Then Marge turned to Shizuku and offered to show what the combination consists of, on which this technique is built. He began the explanation with ice magic, specifically with the skill of freezing, then added space magic, and finally, the magic of the connection between heaven and earth. Shizuku reacted with surprise to the possibility of using freezing in storage. But Marge explained that it wasn't quite that. He began the demonstration on a small object, noting that much more power is required for full application. Marge created a peculiar cavity inside the object, comparable to an egg without a yolk, and with the help of spatial magic, sent it into the air. Shizuku clarified whether the object rises into the sky, but Marge explained that its goal is the sky and beyond, up to the area known as the Sea of Stars. He recalled an incident when one person during an experiment reached this point but unfortunately did not return. However, his notes were found, and from them it became clear that objects sent there could remain in that place for some time. It is precisely there that Marge places her materials. He explained that the reason for choosing this particular point is that there is almost nothing there, unlike the land and underground, which are filled with information. Moreover, it is easier to scan coordinates in this space. Shizuku noted to herself how many nuances need to be considered. Marge, recalling the advice of one person, shared a wise piece of advice. Skills should be chosen based on the principle of synergy. In his thoughts, he noted that this was the very idea Arthur had been missing until the very end. Without eagle vision and enhanced cutting, having lost all skills, it is impossible to create something truly outstanding. He wondered if Arthur had noticed that all the lost skills had been returned to him. At this time, Ko reported that a pack of monsters had been discovered to the west. Marge confirmed that he understood and invited Shizuka to go with him. She activated the skills, enhanced acceleration, and wolf form. 4 days later, when the summoned mercenary exterminators arrived at the scene, all the monsters had already been destroyed. In the mayor's house, Marge turned to Ko for help, expressing his trust in her. Ko assured him that he could rely on her. Then, they went inside, where they were met by a woman who inquired about the purpose of their visit. Marge hesitated a little, but the woman quickly introduced herself as the secretary and began clarifying the details. Marge handed her an object, asking her to give it to the boss. The woman exclaimed in surprise upon seeing that it was parts of a destroyed monster. Ko explained that they had an agreement regarding the reward, the conditions on their part were fulfilled, and there were 12 more such parts lying in the yard, which also needed to be counted. The secretary was bewildered. It crossed her mind that if they involved the guild, they could strike a profitable deal, as such trophies hold immense value. Even in the worst-case scenario, they are worth several million. Out loud, she only said that she couldn't believe what was happening. Ko Yi, noticing her reaction, calmly clarified that she was not insisting on breaking the agreement, but reminded her that a reward of such a large amount could become a problem for the city's finances. Then she suggested formalizing everything as a debt, so as not to demand immediate payment in cash, but instead to receive assistance from the city in the future if such a situation arises. She also requested official documents from the mayor. The secretary agreed, and soon Marge read the prepared document, which stated that over the next 10 years, the city of Kinui commits to providing financial and other assistance. Marge thanked Ko, expressing appreciation for her work. Ko replied that she just did what she could. Marge sadly noted that he himself could not conduct such negotiations, and wondered if he appeared intimidating. Ko did not agree with this, trying to support him. Reflecting further, Marge acknowledged that although the situation did not go exactly as planned, they managed to establish a strong connection with the city. He mentioned an abandoned village that served as a refuge for demons, and suggested that the situation there was unstable. If they should receive anything, it should be done through Kinui. He added that constant actions of this kind would arouse suspicion, and therefore he first needed to act inconspicuously. He decided to arrange a meeting in the shelter to avoid information leaks. Then he turned to Shizuku, asking if she had changed her mind. Shizuku confidently confirmed her readiness, stating that she did not want to allow any deaths and was not going to take anything from others. She admitted that she considered Marge's principles to be the most correct. In response, Marge said that the losers in the war become victims, and if that is the case, he intends to fix everything. After which he suggested that everyone set out to begin developing a strategy that covers even the farthest corners of Suniva. A voice filled with anxiety and pain spoke about Shizuku, emphasizing that she should not go back because that place is too dangerous. He felt that he could not die until he passed on important information to her, the name of their enemy. Shizuku recalled the story of werewolves that her parents had told her. In ancient times, they fled because of the war in which all the men fought and died, and only the women, children, and those who were too weak to fight managed to survive. Werewolves found refuge only in this place. The only surviving man of their kind was her grandfather. Marge gave the command to move towards the mountains. In her mind, the thought of endemic skills was swirling unique abilities that hold special importance precisely in these vast territories. Shizuku continued her story, explaining that the forest was shrinking every year, and along with it, the strength of the werewolves was weakening. Because of this, they were forced to flee again and again until they finally disappeared into places where people did not reach. Koei, having heard the story, repeated that this was the story of the werewolves. In her thoughts, Marge noted that they were walking to better study the surrounding area, but the road turned out to be extremely difficult. Something was wrong with the air. It cut the throat as if filled with invisible needles. Marge commented that the path was difficult, and asked Koa if she was all right. Koa, though tired, assured the master that she was fine. Meanwhile, Marge couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that no one lived in this area. She doubted whether it was possible for an S-rank dungeon to be located here. Shizuku explained that the dungeon is dangerous, but you can obtain meat and useful materials there. And before they reached the goal, she added that they survived as best they could, even using the blood of monsters. Marge became alert, sensing something was wrong, and decided to activate Divine Vision. He reported alarming news. Everything ahead was shrouded in smoke, and something bad was clearly happening. Shizuku was horrified because there was a strict ban on smoke production in their homeland. This meant that something serious had happened there. Marge used gravity and moved to another place. He asked Shizuku where her house was located. She pointed in the direction, and then, seeing what was happening, screamed, calling for her father and mother. Marge ordered her not to move, promising that he would get there faster. He activated the 6 arms of the Asura ability, and, fighting alone, destroyed the crowd of monsters threatening the village. Ko asked worriedly if he was injured, to which Marge confidently replied that he was fine and that they were already there. Shizuku activated the Armored Wolves skill and found her parents unconscious, with severe burns, and realized that they were not breathing. Marge suggested taking them away from here, as it had become dangerous. Shizuku, overwhelmed with despair, asked what they should do now. Marge calmly told her not to worry and activated the Archangel's Blessing, a healing skill previously used on Geraint. He explained that her parents would be fine now, except for an already healed injury. Although they lost consciousness due to the smoke, they should soon regain it. Shizuku began to cry, continuously thanking him. However, Marge was overwhelmed with heavy thoughts. He pondered how in this world the strong become even stronger, while the weak only lose the last they have and slide into even greater poverty. Marge acknowledged that such cruelty was the natural order of things, but he could not come to terms with it. After all, humanity had created civilization, culture, wisdom, all to rise above this. And yet, before him was a terrifying reality. The destitute, deprived of land, family, dignity, even the right to defend themselves. Their very lives were being taken away. And if this continues to happen again and again, then everything they do loses its meaning. This comes out only to kill again and again, to stand on the bones of a destroyed society and proclaim oneself king. If this is the essence of what is happening, then knowledge, culture, society, country, and the very idea of a kingdom lose their significance. Ko, noticing his condition, cautiously called out to Marge. He briefly replied that everything was fine. Then she asked if he would like to help the villagers first. Marge quickly assessed the situation and said that the demons had started coming out of the labyrinth. Shizuku added that there would be more of them, but this would give them some time. Marge suggested hiding the residents on the other side of the village to gain precious minutes. He added that they have to defeat the boss at the end of the dungeon and asked Shizuku to take care of the residents. She explained that for this, she needed an endemic skill. Then Marge decided to lend her the necessary ability and began the transfer process. Shizuku was chosen as the recipient, and the skill being transferred to her was called intuition. It was the ability to sense approaching danger. Shizuku was surprised. She didn't understand why this particular skill was needed, as the enemy was already before them. Marge calmly replied that intuition was needed in order to escape. Shizuku was confused, but he explained that she would not be able to do anything in the battle and should leave to stay unharmed. Even if only she is saved, it will be important. However, Shizuku abandoned the idea of escape. Even if she has to die, she will not retreat, because there is nowhere to run. Marge admitted that he once saved himself and survived, even though everything was taken from him. And he doesn't like it either. He doesn't approve of such things. Shizuku, looking at him with understanding, said that she perfectly understands his feelings. Marge, a little wearily, explained that he just wants her to live. This is the essence of human nature. If you survived, it means you won. Even wild animals think this way. But living only for the sake of survival is the path of animals, not humans. It is a meaningful goal that distinguishes a person from a beast, even if it sounds selfish. Shizuku replied that she understood everything. But despite this, she was not going to run away. Marge announced that they would now split into two groups. One would go to fight the labyrinth boss and block the source of the demons, while the second would stay to defend the village. He asked Shizuku to take on the protection of the village until the first group completed the task. However, before leaving, he repeated his request, saying that if Shizuku could, then she should not place her life above others. Shizuku agreed, adding that she herself would never give up her own life for this. Marge promised to do the same. Then Shizuku explained that to reach the area called the farthest corners of Aonosodo, one must first go west, through the village. Marge, saying goodbye, told Ko to hold on tight and assured Shizuku that they would succeed, reminding them not to forget about the village. Shizuku wished them to defeat the boss. Marge confidently said to leave it to them. Shizuku briefly encouraged, and go ahead. Marge indicated that the source of the monsters is located to the west. Ko looked at the sky and agreed, determining that the entrance to the area called Blue Thin Threads is indeed situated on the western side of the mountain. There was no doubt about the direction the monsters were heading. They were going exactly there. At that moment, the monsters appeared. Marge ordered them to get off the road. Ko added that this road had been cleared in advance so that the village residents could conveniently move along it. It served as a path to the labyrinth. Marge stated that they had reached the end of the blue thread, and there was no time to lose, asking Ko to start preparing. She immediately agreed. Marge activated the skill transfer technique and proceeded to execute the capture. A specific skill was selected, and the process began. This was an ability inherited from Gordon, from the moment they captured a certain creature named Black Day. Then it transformed into the so-called Border Vigilance. Ko specified that the total SP, conditional energy or debt, of the debtor Gordon reached the lower limit of 999,999,999. This was the maximum amount of SP that could be restored at the current moment. From now on, the entire received amount will be automatically deducted until the full repayment of the debt. The vigilance of the border was activated. Marge noted that it is now useless to resist. The vigilant border will repel any attack. It weighs more than lead, and no blow, no matter how strong, can move it. It possesses incredible rigidity and mass. Moreover, in combination with powerful thrust, It can turn not just into a shield, but into a real cannon. All 6 arms of Asura were fully activated. There was an acceleration, and Marge emphasized that they would attack without delay. Ko once again confirmed her readiness. War is nothing more than a race for survival, where the essence lies not so much in achieving specific goals as in leaving offspring behind. It is not a struggle for spheres of influence or territorial dominance, but natural selection, in which the strong prevail and the weak disappear, simply being destroyed. The Marja group advanced forward and reached the first level of an area called Blue Threads. In his thoughts, Marge pondered that people created culture not to remain forever under the power of this harsh nature. After all, civilization was created for this reason. This question had arisen in him long ago, and since then it had not given him peace. On the second level of the Blue Threads, Marge continued his internal reflections, considering that the human race is truly unique. Unlike other species, humans have built a civilization that must mean something. Reaching the third level, he delved even deeper into his thoughts. He pondered that life contrary to nature is precisely what makes a human being human. War, although it appears beastly, became a result of civilization. This is a question of survival in the jungle. But still, one wants to understand, what is the true purpose of all these forms we have created? Society, country, state. On the fourth level of the Blue Threads, Ko pointed to something ahead. Marge suggested stopping for a while. The horizon stretched out before them, which was not such a rare occurrence for S-class dungeons. Ko began drinking water from the horizon, and when Marge called out to her in surprise, she replied that the water tasted somewhat atypical but was clean fresh water, in no way inferior to water from above-ground sources. Marge noted to himself in confusion that Ko probably knew what he was doing. He was still worried, as it was unknown what might be lurking in the underground waters. He thought that such bodies of water could very well contain poison, but on the other hand, the lake turned out to be enormous, comparable to an ocean, and perhaps all the stories about its toxicity were exaggerated, as is often the case. Starting from level A, landscapes appear. There are even rumors that at level S, people have seen a real sky inside the dungeon. This seemed incredibly strange. The farthest level was considered to be the blue one. But the very fact that somewhere in the labyrinth there might be a real horizon was astonishing. Ko wondered if it would be possible to reach the desired location by jumping. Marge immediately ruled out this possibility, pointing out that the distance was too great for a single leap. Moreover, countless bees were swarming above the ceiling, and on the other side was a lake teeming with sea serpents. Passing through all of this was necessary, and multiple jumps would only slow down the progress. When Ko asked what they would do, Marge replied that they would need a boat. He activated the art of the underworld and created a vessel. Marge warned Ko to be more careful, then activated the vigilant border, played the Song of the Divine Era, began the search for ancient magic, and applied the art of Aeolian's storm wind. They started moving. Ko noticed that a swarm of demons was appearing ahead. Marge remained calm. He activated the art of Aeolus's storm and wind, enhanced it, and ordered the use of water arrows. If they were on land, rigid and armor-piercing spells would be required, but now on the water arrows were perfectly suitable. He noted that the battle was not their goal. They just needed to break through. Their path led to the deepest level. Ko confirmed her understanding of the order. Meanwhile, in the village of wolves, Shizuku's father regained consciousness. He was confused, asking himself what was happening to him. He recalled how a demon attacked their house, and he and his wife found themselves inside, inhaling smoke as the building was already on fire. However, he was surprised to realize that they were still alive, and their burns and wounds had healed. Around them was not their hut. Someone had covered them with fabric and, evidently, hidden them from the demons. He called his daughter. Shizuku noticed with relief that her father had woken up. Still puzzled, he asked how she managed to save them, as she previously couldn't even count past 10. Shizuku replied that it became possible thanks to others. Now she knows how to apply combat skills, and one person she trusts went to the Blue Threads to stop the source of the demons. The father reacted sharply. Shizuku tried to calm him down, assuring him that the one currently in the Blue Threads is capable of handling hundreds and thousands of demons. he shouldn't worry. However, the father explained that the problem lies elsewhere. In the depths of the blue threads hides a person, not a demon, who is behind what is happening. It is this person who is releasing the demons. Shizuku asked in amazement who it was. Her father replied that their enemy was Duke Abika. Marge asked Koa how much time had passed, to which she replied that about half a minute had passed, adding that the expanse consumes all their time. Marge noted that they should hurry, as the awakening of the main demon at the barrier would soon be completed. He suddenly noticed the presence of other people. Paying attention to the emblems on the shoulders of the four, he realized that they were people of Duke Abek, and wondered how they ended up in this place. Suddenly, one of these warriors called out to them, demanding that they come out. Marge appeared and went out to meet them. One of the men stated that they would not let them pass until they found out who they were and where they came from. In response, Marge introduced himself, calling himself Marge Siu, a former guild member. The man asked again with disbelief, clarifying whether he was indeed the Marge, the owner of the Silver Divine Sword. Upon receiving confirmation, he was surprised and acknowledged that he was right in his suspicions. Marge noted to himself that almost 3 weeks had passed since his departure, and it seemed that the silver sword had lost its former glory. Meanwhile, the man mockingly reported that 3 or 4 days ago, the leader of Marge was humiliated before their master, and this became a great disgrace for everyone. Marge reacted coldly to this. The man explained that they themselves tracked the source of the demon's appearance, discovered this labyrinth, and decided to capture it, not relying on the weak and broken guild. In his thoughts, Marge noted that they indeed decided to act independently, without waiting for the Duke's order. He clarified aloud that they had arrived here on their own initiative, not by direct order. The man replied that a good leader must use his mind and take on such decisions. Marge mentally recalled that the Duke of Vabek was aware of the sharp increase in the number of demons in Kinsey and the surrounding regions. Then he selected an elite group of fighters from his personal army for the investigation, and it was these people who now stood before him. Rumors circulated that the Duke had lost faith in the guild and intended to organize the offensive himself to claim all the glory. Marge clearly understood that this was exactly what was happening now. The man continued with disdain, stating that someone like Marge wouldn't understand this, as he was expelled from the guild because of Ultra. He added that this was especially shameful, considering the affiliation with a rank S group. Marge mentally noted that the interlocutor seemed unaware that he himself had long since left the guild. In response, he calmly stated that they probably had not yet informed the Duke about everything. The man with a smirk stated that he simply had no other choice but to personally lead the attack, due to the approaching horde of demons. Marge noted to himself that Duke Abika should not find out about this prematurely, because after the attack is completed, it will be possible to capture these people before they manage to leave the labyrinth. With the help of magic, the memories of the detainees can be sealed, preventing any information leaks. Koei, addressing her mentor, reported that outside, Miss Shizuku was waiting for their return alone, and therefore it was worth moving on as quickly as possible. Inwardly, Marge agreed, understanding that there was no time left for unnecessary talk. Otherwise, it would be too late for everyone. He told Ko that it was time to hurry. However, a man from the Duke's squad spoke disdainfully, accusing them of being unable to retreat in time and of not knowing how to listen. He grabbed Ko's amulet and demonstratively threw it away, justifying himself by saying that his hand simply slipped. He mockingly added that if this is a bottomless swamp, then it's worth looking for the amulet as soon as possible. Otherwise, it will soon be completely submerged, and the most that can be found is half of its former value. Other members of his group, observing this, began to mock. They called Marge and Ko a pathetic sight, worthy only of contempt, considering them worthless former members of the S-rank group, cast aside. They stated that they were going to leave, calling Marge an outsider. The man echoed them, saying that it was time to prove that true talent lies not in loud titles and accolades, but in real actions. Ko, embarrassed, apologized to Marge and offered to search for the amulet herself so that he could continue his journey. However, Marge insisted that they would search together. He remembered that in Kinui he had heard about the origin of this amulet. It was an ancient gemstone and was considered a sacred treasure of the werewolf tribe. Ignoring his loss would be a sign of disrespect. Besides, they had set 2 goals for themselves: to conquer the labyrinth in the shortest possible time and to help the werewolves on the surface. Therefore, while those four are engaged in battle with the main demon, it will be much more effective to find the amulet. He also noted that although the Duke's warriors were overly talkative, they possessed a certain determination and believed they could defeat the Demon King. But such excessive self-confidence rarely leads to success. While the amulet has not yet sunk, it is necessary to search for it together. Koei readily agreed. A man from the team, observing them, expressed surprise that the legendary owner of the silver sword was indeed standing before him. He recalled the rumors about the brilliant girl magician, the prodigy of the blade, the former palace gatekeeper, and noted that perhaps these rumors were true. He also complained that adventurers are too easily led astray. One of the girls from the man's team mentally recalled that when she heard about Ultra's disgrace, it also seemed to her that Marge's group had lost its former grip. However, now she began to doubt it. Her covert operation allowed them to hide from the enemy, conserving strength. Otherwise, they would not have been able to overcome the level S labyrinth. And yet she couldn't help but notice. Marge behaved absolutely naturally. He did not hide. His behavior remained calm and confident. If you think about it, even among elite units across the continent, few could demonstrate such strength and composure. A man from the team waved his hand and said it was time to leave these clowns and move on. Their goal was to destroy the main demon. But as soon as he opened the massive door, something resembling giant roots burst out of it, instantly grabbing almost his entire team, leaving only one of them alive. The girl, gripped by fear, tried to hide, but suddenly felt a tentacle grab her leg. Marge said he was glad to help Kusan. The girl thanked the master. Thanks to the cleansing skill, the stains disappeared and she felt better. Marjorie and Kusan wondered how things were going with the demon. The guy was pondering the strength of the group of four and their confidence, believing that it was time to put an end to this. He was also tormented by the question of whether they had managed to overcome the giant snail. The girl warned her master to watch his step, pointing to the slime on the floor. Meanwhile, the master advised Kusan to step away from the door and keep her face away. She agreed. Marge, with arms wide open, was pushing the massive wooden gates, creating a passage. Around him, dust smoke swirled from the parted gates. A powerful blow or explosion spread from the center, creating waves of energy that dispersed throughout the space. The master's eyes were wide open from the force he was applying. Marge activated the spatial rift, slicing through numerous roots flying in different directions. There was a strong smell of dampness in the room, which caused discomfort among those present. Not far from the guys lay someone's corpse. Master and Ku stood looking up at the gates that were closing. A corpse was hanging in the room, bleeding. Kusan noted that there should be another one. Soon they found what they were looking for, confirming their suspicions. The girl sat, huddled in fear, and called her condition a curse, then clarified that it was a divine curse. Marge asked what that meant. The girl pleaded for help. She was very afraid of the tentacles. The master suggested that the injured girl tell the truth, promising to help her. In response, the little girl, trembling, began to explain that the platoon commander initiated the summoning of a demon, but evidence was needed for this, after which the commander released the demons. The guy began to ponder the sensitivity of insect-like creatures to smells, wondering how they could be lured out using ointment. He also explained that unauthorized actions in the army are severely punished, and to avoid censure, the commander claimed that he had no choice due to a possible demon breakthrough and he needed evidence. Now Marge understood why he brought so many demons. The commander wanted to be knighted, but after everything he had done, it was divine punishment. Marge expressed concern that they had already sent enough demons to destroy the village and that there was no time left. The girl reminded him about the help. The master replied that he would keep his promise and asked them to stay put. A huge, imposing creature resembling a slug loomed over the boy. Its size was so immense that it filled the entire space. Marge was astonished by such dimensions. The master stood face to face with the gigantic creature, whose tentacles stretched above him, and the tension was evident in his gaze. The young man, with a determined expression on his face, extended his hand forward and uttered the Cositus spell. This powerful attack was aimed at the slime. Marge commented that the situation had become difficult, and Kausan added that they needed to move forward. and their best defense now was the barrier. The girl confirmed that she could help, stating that with the skills of a master, they would be able to attack even inside the shell. The master claimed that their goal was not to defeat the main demon, and Kusan affirmed this. The girl clarified that their real objective was to conquer this dungeon in the shortest possible time. Kusan expressed relief, noting that they were lucky despite encountering the main demon already on the 13th level. Meanwhile, the enormous monster loomed over the master who was trying to oppose it. Marge was preparing to activate the spatial jump, focusing on his powers. Kusan and the found girl watched his actions, not fully understanding what he intended to do. The guy, having risen high into the air, looked down at the girls, who exclaimed that it was high. He was significantly above them, probably preparing to jump or fall into a deep hole. The girl exclaimed in amazement at what he was doing, and Marge, concentrating, activated the 6 Arms of Asura ability. His hands began to transform, preparing for a powerful attack. The young man, taking on a determined look, ordered the girl to close her eyes and ears, repeating after Kusan. Then he rushed forward. The girl asked what he was doing, while Kusan explained that they were trying to open a hole directly to the lower levels. Destruction continued around them. A huge black hole opened up in front of the team, from which debris was pouring out, and an exclamation was heard that it was impossible. This opening apparently led deep down. Someone present noted that they seemed to have already descended to the 14th level. There was another powerful impact or explosion, creating a wave of destruction that scattered debris around. It was the 14th level, confirming their further advancement. After another powerful blow, which was accompanied by the destruction of the surrounding space, Marge, with a serious expression on his face, deepened the hole once more. Kusan and her companion watched the proceedings with undisguised amazement. The girl asked if Marge was really trying to horizontally destroy the very structure of the dungeon. Marge was descending at great speed, making his way through the earth's thickness. The long journey from the first level to the very lowest level of the dungeon, as it turned out, had been completed by him. Many had previously doubted such a possibility, but he proved otherwise. The ground literally flew apart, forming a huge crater leading downwards. This destructive spectacle astonished Marge's companions, as it was believed that the floors in the dungeons were indestructible. Now it became clear that this was not the case. Powerful blows continued, and the dungeon shook with each new destruction. Marge continued his path, breaking through more and more layers, causing astonishment among those who witnessed his actions. Even his comrades did not expect such a demonstration of strength, as he was not the main one in the Silver Sword. Kusan and her companion were discussing what they had seen, their faces expressing shock and bewilderment. It became clear that the master had already left the Guild of the Silver Sword, which apparently explained his unexpected appearance and incredible abilities. The girl turned to her companion, pointing out what had happened. She did not object to gossip, but urged her companion to check the facts next time before making hasty conclusions. The adventurer continued to strike, repeatedly breaking through the ground, each time creating a shockwave. His actions led to reaching the 20th level of the dungeon, as evidenced by the destruction. He kept forging his path, demonstrating incredible power. Finally, Marge stopped, having reached the final point of his journey, and declared that he was finished. He assessed the work done, considering the number of levels that had been destroyed, confirming that it was a significant breakthrough. It turned out that the dungeon could not withstand such a load, and this was not a pre-planned breach. Marge hovered over the newly formed chasm while the girls watched from above. They wondered how deep it was in the tunnel and why it was so quiet there. Kusan inquired of the master about how things were going. The guy came down, informing that they had reached the lowest level of the dungeon and everyone could be congratulated. The girl snapped back, to which the master asked the reason. The girl expressed her bewilderment and even surprise, noting that people cannot run on water and fly, although, as it turned out, they were winning. Kusan asked the girl's name, to which she replied that her name was Mero Valende. The girl explained that, although people cannot simply run on water, there is a way. If you put your left foot forward before the right one sinks, you can run on the water surface. Mero exclaimed that it was impossible, to which Kusan explained that, although something seemed practically impossible, it was not entirely so. The master called Kusan. The difference between impossible and practically impossible was pointed out, and this time they simply crossed the line. Marge and Ku moved forward. They rushed towards the huge monster, which, apparently, was their target. The giant toad, known as the Demon King, according to Ku-san, looked extremely puzzled and upset. Marge noted that it seemed he did not expect an attack from above. A huge, pointed boulder loomed over Marge. The guy noted that they didn't have time for the monster. This meant they needed to act quickly. Marge stated that he has a friend on the surface who will fight for his return. These words emphasized his goal and motivation, as well as indicated his connection to the world beyond the dungeon. The giant toad continued to attack, thrusting out its blade-like tongue. Marge dodged the blows, creating whirlwinds of air around himself, which allowed him to avoid direct attacks and direct a boulder at the enemy. A powerful blow pierced the enormous body of the toad, causing splashes and fragments. The attack created a huge hole in the monster's body, indicating the incredible strength of the attacker. It was a decisive strike in the battle with the Demon King. The village of werewolves was engulfed in flames, and the buildings blazed, crumbling into dust. Shizuko watched the destruction, her face expressing shock and confusion. What had happened was complete devastation. A giant monster resembling a mantis, whose body was covered with a chitinous shell, appeared over the blazing ruins. Shizuko, activating her armored wolf fangs, declared with determination that she could hold her own in the fight. The girl felt that her mana, which she could borrow from her master, was at its limit, and her activity was declining. She remembered Marge, who extended her lifespan, and realized that she must defend this land, the land of fertile greenery and animals, which their ancestors had protected. Meanwhile, explosions continued around her, and she had to destroy everything that tried to steal her life and pave the way for her family's life. Shizuko screamed, not to say that running away was easy. In her mind, the girl wondered whether it was reasonable to avoid the negative and go through it, or if it was a kind of life. Shizuko, fending off attacks, convinced herself not to think about escape simply because she could do it. Shizuko stated that she cannot call a person who is merely breathing a human. Marge understood this and gave her a skill so that she would not run away, indicating her deep connection with him and his influence on her combat path. The girl continued to fight, fending off numerous attacks, demonstrating her determination. She was confident that Marge, being strong, would be able to conquer the labyrinth. This belief gave her strength in battle as she awaited his return. A multitude of mantises attacked the girl, who, despite this, continued to fight but felt her mana running out. She understood that she needed to hold on until Marge returned. One of the mantises cried out in surprise, apparently not expecting such a strong resistance. Shizuko, despite the pain and fatigue, continued to fight. Her body was wounded, but her spirit was not broken. She fiercely declared that she would continue to fight because it was her role. The girl, wounded and exhausted, lay on the ground, but then got up, feeling a warning from her, quote, scout's intuition. She realized that they would now have a little time, and upon seeing the monster, she assumed it was a monster captain. A giant mantis monster, surrounded by flames, towered before her, and behind it stood a whole army of smaller mantises. She stood alone against this enormous army, preparing for what seemed to be an unequal battle. Threatening mantises continued to appear over the burning ruins of the village, their intimidating appearance foreshadowing new attacks. The wounded girl struggled to hold on, but her kin urged her to retreat, shouting that it was enough and they needed to leave. However, Shizuko was convinced that this was not all. The girl's father, with a determined expression on his face, urged her to stop fighting in order to buy time to escape. Shizuko, however, with pain on her face, replied that it was impossible to escape from this warning of a powerful force. With tremendous speed tearing through the ground, a blade of light swept through the ranks of enemies, creating powerful shockwaves. Shizuku-san, observing this, felt incredible amazement at what she saw. The attack was so fast and powerful that it seemed almost invisible. Through the clouds of dust appeared two girls, one of whom was Mero, and the other was Kusan. Shizuko, noticing the back of her companion, realized that this back she saw was the very one that always turned up at the right moment. Marge stood amidst the ruins, surrounded by clouds of dust. He was ready to take on the rest, and his presence inspired confidence. The guy stated that he would take care of the rest, affirming his determination to finish what he started. Shizuko, looking at him, asked about the labyrinth, whether it would be captured, and if new monsters would appear. Marge replied that there would be no more new monsters. Marge stated that he would not let any of the monsters escape, as he had scanned the area using the divine eye, and the enemies remained only around the village and in the valley. The guy asked if there were people in the village behind Shizuko and her father, to which he received an affirmative answer. With approval, he instructed everyone to stay where they were. Marge used the powerful tornado technique, creating a whirlwind. This whirlwind lifted all the monsters into the air, scattering them in different directions and causing widespread destruction. No monster could withstand such power. Shizuko exclaimed that it was incredible as the monsters scattered in panic in different directions. The guy with a determined expression activated his abilities, using Subspace Rift and Dark Ice simultaneously. All the monsters were lifted into the air by this incredible power. The sky above the village was filled with shards of monsters. Now they were scattering in all directions like dust. The spell Spatial Ice Blades was cast, attesting to the devastating power used by Marge. All the monsters turned into frozen shards, reflecting the sunlight and shining as if congratulating on the deliverance from misfortune. Finally, peace reigned over the village, and the sky was cleared of enemies. In the werewolf shelter, many villagers bowed in gratitude before the adventurer Margidono and Kodono, expressing their deep appreciation for saving the village. They were saved from complete destruction. The head of the village, Asagi, introduced his wife, whose name was Kasumi. They stood before the young man and his companions, expressing their gratitude and welcoming them to the village. The village chief acknowledged that they are going through a difficult time that has brought much pain, and that they have nothing to offer him. Nevertheless, he stated that he would do everything possible to repay, and if Marju needed a concubine, he could take Shizuku with him. The young man firmly refused, and Shizuku, upon hearing this, was shocked. The girl became dejected because of the master's response. Marge continued, expressing confidence that Shizuku felt the same way, and he also asked if she was the queen of the werewolves. The village chief explained that they are of royal blood, but he does not claim the title of king, so Shizuku will not be a princess. Then he asked if they would like to hear about how this relates to the restoration of the werewolf village, to which he received an affirmative answer. The village chief said that the werewolves once had a king too, but they lost him during the war, and their place remains vacant. He explained the history of their people and the reason for their current situation. Marge and his co listened to him attentively. Asagi pointed out the value that Marge showed, calling it a symbol of return. It was something important for their people that could help in restoring their lost status. The item that was a treasure marked the trinity of their throne, and now they had to bring in a new heir. This meant that the werewolves had hope for the revival of their former greatness, and Marge might play a key role in this. The head of the werewolf village was explaining to the kids about the hereditary relics, the king, his consort, and the heir, which were passed down from generation to generation. He expressed relief that they were safe, as he was very worried that they might have drowned somewhere in the swamp. Asagi showed the sword that was worn by those who were to ascend to the throne, calling it the katana. It was an important symbol of their power and heritage, passed from hand to hand. The village chief explained that this sword, which is a kind of curved sword, was forged by ancestors, craftsmen, and miners who lived in this area. It was created using technology different from that of humans, making it a unique and powerful artifact. Asagi emphasized that only when they have both the precious stone and the sword can they become the king of the forest. He demonstrated the importance of these two items for legitimizing power among the werewolves. The adventurer and his companion listened to the village chief's explanations. Then the guys noted that the relics should be with Asagi and Kasumi. The leader of the werewolves said he had heard about Marge's aimless journey from his daughter and asked if he was looking for a place to stay. He extended his hand. The entire village of werewolves, including the chief and Shizuka, bowed before the adventurer, begging him to become their king. It was a moment of deep respect and hope placed upon him. The village chief, Asagi-san, looked up at the adventurer who was sitting cross-legged. His gaze was full of seriousness and anticipation for an answer. Marge, looking at the village chief and Shizuka, said that they lost their composure because they almost lost their family. He then asked if he had only come here today, pointing out that he had only recently appeared in their lives. The guy noted that it was too reckless. He was asked about what he knows about the tribe of werewolves, and immediately there was an answer about not using power for oneself, but using it for another. The village chief extended his hand forward, addressing Marge. He spoke of the great power the young man had used for the sake of their tribe and his generosity in returning the jewels. At this moment, representatives of the werewolf tribe gathered, attentively listening to what was happening. They expressed reverence and respect towards the saviors. Asagi explained that the tribe has always revered the strong and proud, regardless of race or age. He emphasized that they crown the best as their king, explaining their long-standing tradition of choosing a leader. Marge and Kosan listened attentively to these words, slightly surprised by this turn of events. The village chief continued, asserting that werewolves always followed the principle of reign without shame in heaven and on earth, and this was their only pride. He added that in their way of life, the strong could become king, confirming that Marge, even without being a werewolf, could take this position thanks to his strength. Meanwhile, the master pondered what was said, realizing that his notions about werewolves based on stories and rumors were mistaken. His gaze was focused as he delved into his thoughts. In his reflections, Marge realized that werewolves were never born warriors, but worked hard every day so that their tribe could become such. It was their way of life, and they aspired for anyone who was the best warrior to become king. He realized that their strength was the result of continuous efforts, not an innate gift. Asagi suggested to the master to accept the sword, symbolizing power, and stay with them. He promised that the werewolves would hunt beasts and plow the land for him if he accepted their offer. Marge intently looked at the sword, contemplating this important decision. The master confirmed that his journey had no goal, and Kosan had only just learned to walk. He added that he wouldn't mind settling down somewhere, possibly hinting that this place could become a home for them. The leader of the werewolves explained that if Marge became king, he would not have to worry about food. At that moment, the boy's hand reached for the sword. Kosan repeated that the master can choose to be happy. Marge, looking at her, acknowledged that she had already said this and once again pondered her words and his decision. The girl, looking at the master, said that initially they were one person and expressed hope that he would understand her. Therefore, she wanted Marge to choose his own path to happiness, hinting that he was not obliged to accept their offer if it would not make him happy. The guy stated that he is not someone who can be trusted and that he does not know those present. However, he also said that he has one question for them to get to know them better. In the middle of the square stood a wooden cage, inside which was the bound Marrow, her gaze directed downward, expressing despair. Around the cage gathered many werewolves, observing the proceedings. Their faces expressed a mixture of curiosity, anxiety, and anger, creating a tense atmosphere. Marge pointed to the girl in the cage, stating that she was one of those who were in the labyrinth, and also accused her group of orchestrating or provoking the escape of monsters from the labyrinth for their own benefit. He emphasized that this was the true reason for the monster's attack on the village. The village chief and other werewolves were shocked by what they heard. The master, pointing at the captive Marrow, asked the werewolves what they intended to do with her. He addressed them with a challenge, demanding an answer and urging them to make a decision. The werewolves, including Asagi, looked stunned by his question, their faces showing a mix of confusion and horror. Someone in the crowd shouted that she should be punished, but that would be the cause of a new war. Another suggested exchanging her for the village's autonomy. A third noted that the Lord would not keep his promise, so she should be put to work. Others shouted that she should be killed. One of the werewolves, who was near the cage, was holding a dead baby in her arms and was crying bitterly, exclaiming that this woman was alive but her child was not. She was asking why this happened and if anything could have been done. Marrow replied that she was powerless to do anything. Marge made contact with Marrow and told her about the skill Blessing of the Seraphim, which granted the ability to revive even after death. But Marrow replied that she couldn't do anything as she was bound, and he was planning to borrow the healing skill. The mayor was warned that using this skill would result in the loss of two things, abilities and lifespan. Marge explained that the skill consisted of a huge amount of SP, and even a small part could absorb other skills. He also emphasized that resuscitation shortened the user's lifespan, which was a serious risk. The lost decades of life were not known, as it was a rare and unique skill. Nothing was known about it, and there was no point in verifying it, so it was not easy to use. It turned out that Tina had once used the same skill, but ultimately never resorted to it again. The werewolves observing the events discussed that the fate of the woman in the cage after resuscitation could be sentenced to death, but everything depended on Mero's actions. Mero, upon hearing him, replied that she would do it, expressing her readiness for any actions. The master responded with approval, and then, turning to the werewolves, he decisively ordered them to stop shouting and listen to him. The werewolf mother joyfully embraced the infant, her face expressing relief and happiness. The child began to make sounds, confirming his return to life, bringing joy to those present. The girl asked if anyone else had died besides the baby, to which she was told no. The werewolves, including Asagi, watched the proceedings with serious faces, their expressions ranging from relief to slight concern, as they realized the implications of the resuscitation and the subsequent decisions. Marge admitted that Mero had restored what was destroyed, but emphasized that even if a thief returns what was stolen, the crime does not disappear. He also stated that the woman's fate has not yet been decided. Shizuko approached the cage and said she hadn't heard anything. Mero, despite her wounds and exhaustion, looked ready to accept her fate. Asagi and her daughter watched her, prepared to listen to what she would say. Shizuko explained that the fate of the woman now depends on herself and on what she says. She emphasized that it would be unfair to make a decision without hearing anything from the prisoner. The werewolf standing by the cage listened attentively. Mero said that this was probably her last chance, and if she could ask for something. There was indignation heard in the crowd. The girl, bending down to the ground, asked to return her friends with the help of the blessing of Seraphim. Her posture expressed deep remorse and plea. She was ready to accept any punishment, as long as her companions were saved. Marge was surprised by such a request. Mero replied that they were enemies of the werewolves, and together did something unforgivable. Mero, pleading, clasped her hands, and drops of water trickled down her face. She spoke about the group she had been fighting for 6 years. Marge was surprised when he heard about the 6 years. He began to ponder. The guy discovered clear coincidences in the years. Kosan urged Marge to think for himself and decide how many things he needs to do and what to do next. Mero, lying on the ground, declared that she would work hard to negotiate with the Duke and would definitely persuade her friends to help her. Mero, kneeling, begged to be allowed to help her comrades, even if it meant shortening her life. Shizuko asked in bewilderment if this would happen even if she shortened her life, to which the girl in the cage agreed. Shizuko answered affirmatively, and then explained that if they did not allow her to save her comrades, the reason for the enemy's return would be their murder. Mero expressed gratitude for the request. The daughter of the head of the werewolves straightened up, looked at the gathered werewolves with fury, and called on all those wishing for the death penalty to step forward. Asagi stated that it is still too early to use prisoners for negotiations with the lords, and to inform them about the existence of the village. He added that it would also be too wasteful to use soldiers for heavy labor. The village chief addressed the werewolves, expressing his opinion and urging them to accept it. He said that Mero and her team were prisoners, and they would gather resources in the labyrinth, which was his proposal for their use. Marge apparently now understood that Mero and her friends were experts in labyrinths. Asagi stated that their conclusion was that when they inform the world about the existence of the village, they will negotiate the return of the prisoners. He concluded that it was their choice. Marge, recalling the sword, thought about the need to prepare for the restoration of the place and what should happen in the liberated territory. He expressed a desire to learn more about this place. He also stated that he is neither proud nor innocent, and that Shizuku is much better suited for the role of village head. The master, thinking about Shizuko, said that she is still young and lacks knowledge. Therefore, until she grows up and becomes worthy of the throne, he will occupy the position of temporary king. He emphasized that this is exactly what he needed. Raising the sword, Marge declared that he would be king and promised to return everything taken and create a new future. His decisive gesture and words inspired those present. The werewolves, bowing their heads in respect and acknowledgement, responded to the master that they would follow him as their king. Their postures expressed complete submission and trust in the new leader. The next day, Mero-san seemed ready for a new challenge. Kosan was nearby. The girl asked if she was going to leave. Mero replied that she had to leave before anyone found out. She asked Kosan if she was her liberator. Ko explained that the werewolves' hearing and sense of smell are sharper than those of humans, and expressed confidence that they all noticed. She understood that therefore no one would accuse her of trying to escape and reveal the village secret. Mero responded with understanding. Ko-san gave the fang to Mero and winked happily, explaining that the master had given her the poisonous fangs of Avritra. She added that this deadly poison is also the bodily fluid of an immortal dragon, and if it is processed into medicine, it might be possible to restore part of the lost lifespan. The master's companion also pointed to the west, speaking of a city in that direction. She asked to find someone who could handle the gifted fang. She also warned that if Mero went west, she would find herself outside the country, and if she didn't want to die, she should leave. She suggested that if this was done, there would be no one to talk to about the location of the village, which was probably important for the safety of the tribe and Mero herself. Ko asked what else was needed. Mero clarified whether the master could give her the ingredients for the medicine, and in response, she heard that she had a message from the master regarding this. The girl expressed the opinion that the Blade of the Silver God was indeed a third-rate group. Her gaze was focused, and she seemed pensive. Ko said that it was almost time to leave and wished good luck on the journey. Then Mero added that if they ever meet again, to tell Marge-san that she will definitely thank him for this. Shizuko and Koe-san looked up in surprise, seeing something from above. The master and the companions recognized the object. A huge stone golem towered over the ground, its powerful body formed from rough rocks. Its appearance inspired fear and awe as it radiated immense strength and seemed indestructible. The clay doll standing on the table in the room was part of a ritual where the master alchemist breathed life into it using his skill. The size and appearance of the doll reflected the alchemist's abilities. Meanwhile, Ko-san and Shizuka were puzzled as to why he was here, wondering about his appearance and what to do next. Marge, looking at Shizuku, ordered her to go around the village and gather everyone in one place. He instructed her not to engage in a fight, which could indicate an impending threat that he intended to face alone. Shizuku agreed and ran to the village. Suddenly, a new figure in a cloak appeared, mentioning skills on credit. She stated that she came to say hello. The master did not understand who it was. The girl in the cloak, brightly smiling, introduced herself as the alchemist Angelina. Her appearance was unexpected, but she seemed friendly. Angelina joyfully reported that she finally reached them, mentioning that there were many twists and turns. 2 months ago, the guild confirmed her rank. Angelina thanked for the warm welcome in the guild, although apparently she had to gather friends herself, since there were no more skills on credit. She asked about the number of attendees and inquired if they were interested in what alchemy was when asked about this craft. The girl began to explain the essence of alchemy, defining it as a technology that brings money, and as a way to, quote, prove the impossible. She claimed that proving the creation of the impossible is much more difficult than proving what can be done, and that eventually, even gold can be created. Angelina enthusiastically exclaimed that she thought it was impossible, but when she tried everything herself, she was convinced otherwise. She added that the world says it made the impossible possible, but for the alchemist, it is a failure. The girl passionately explained why alchemy is so interesting, pointing to the large golem behind her. She claimed that if one is not lazy, a golem can be an excellent assistant, and that among such golems they are gods. But her true dream was to achieve something that cannot be done even with the help of golems. One of the interlocutors said that dreams are important. The other expressed sympathy. Angelina, clearly exhausted, decided she had had enough and got ready to go home, stating that the Silver Sword of God sets exceptional conditions. Her interlocutor, outraged by this decision, tried to stop her, saying that she couldn't just leave like that. The girl, not understanding the reason, asked if it was because of the food. Angelina said that Elia would take care of it later, as she eats well. The interlocutor was puzzled as to why the girl was going home. The girl, clearly embarrassed and angry, exclaimed where the interlocutor's eyes were looking and called him a pervert, to which he in turn explained it as a difference in height. Angelina replied that she came because of Marge, and the interlocutor, with a crazy expression on his face, proudly declared that even without any guy, he would cut down any enemy with his unparalleled Holy Blade technique. The girl stated that she does not like such things, and explained her dissatisfaction by saying that the interlocutor does not understand the value of skills on credit, calling him a pervert. It was noted that the synergy between Marge and the golem was almost insignificant, as the master was so young and already well-versed in his unique skill. Angelina, thoughtfully placing a finger to her lips, stated that she had made the entire journey to find something that even these two could not accomplish. The interlocutor still replied that Angelina should stay, and she asked if this was still relevant even if the group stopped working. With her response, she closed the matter. The girl remembered how, at the age of 8, a person from the guild's headquarters visited her and drew up a contract right on a napkin. She initially refused, but he told her to come whenever she wanted, which indicated her early acquaintance with the guild. Angelina, smiling slightly, said that the interlocutor's proposal was also acceptable, and asked if he would agree to her proposal. The girl, pointing her finger, proposed a duel, promising to join the group if the interlocutor won. The man, gritting his teeth, seemed to hesitate before responding, his face expressing a mixture of determination and anxiety. The interlocutor reasoned that golems could appear endlessly if there was earth. He also noted that he had no choice but to accept the offer, although he could not properly control the holy blade. The warrior also did not want rumors about his reputation to spread further, especially considering that he was alone against the scholar. Angelina decided to start with Child of Mud first. The opponent's face reflected tension as he watched the explosion, indicating the alchemist's power. Amidst the clouds of dust, the warrior stood opposite the girl and the little golem. Angelina, looking at the golem, called it a cutie, and declared that if it ever reincarnated into a human, it would become her husband. The opponent exclaimed in astonishment that it was just a baby. Angelina exclaimed that it was Jerry, and that it was not a baby. Smiling, she said that golems are alive, albeit temporarily, and in the distant future he might reincarnate as a human. She added that then they could get married. The opponent, expecting a more formidable enemy, said that what stood before him was some kind of mockery. The warrior, holding a sword, asked his companion to give a signal, to which she, holding a piece of meat, replied that she understood. Angelina noted that Jerry was very good even so. Then the warrior's companion asked if they were ready. The duel began. The warrior, looking at the alchemist, prepared to attack. He declared that the golem would not catch up with him. The little golem, jumping into the air, was preparing for the activation jump, while Angelina explained that now was not the time for overconfidence. The warrior, with a cry of amazement, watched the scene as the golem seemed to descend upon him from above. The girl said that this is the greatest feature of the golem. It reflects the skills of the person who created it. The warrior was in complete amazement at such information. She continued the attack, activating Leap. The golem flying from above looked impressive, while the man exclaimed that it was useless to use the same trick, speaking of the swordsman's skills. He was preparing to strike, but was struck by the next move. Angelina, counting 1, 2, 3, watched with a smile as the warrior's legs were grabbed from beneath the ground by a golem. The man flew backward with a scream. The girl approached the opponent and asked if he was surrendering, calling him a pervert, to which he replied that he would not surrender to a pervert dreaming of intimacy with a golem. Angelina, with a smile, restarted Child of Mud. The opponent was perplexed. Several large golems rose around the girl, their massive bodies made of stones. Angelina explained that she could create more than one golem with the same skill, and that skills are given to absolutely everyone. The girl, with a slight smirk, said that she was sorry, but the interlocutor himself did not want to give up. He asked not to speak that way. The next step was the activation of the jump. The alchemist explained that the real problem was that she didn't have a husband in this world. Elia reassured her interlocutor, saying that there was no need to worry, and that she was sure she would meet him someday. Angelina noted that Elia was a good person, and she said that she had something for the girl. Against the backdrop of the morning city bathed in moonlight, the warrior woke up with a loud scream, and Elia greeted him with a smile, wishing him a good morning. She was sitting at the table, reading a book, and noted that it was difficult to drag him here. The question was raised about Angelina's whereabouts, to which the answer followed that she had just left the city. The warrior, realizing this, exclaimed that they still had a chance to get ahead, and then, with amazement, asked about Marge's things that Gordon had taken from the abyss, pointing to the place where they stood. Ilya explained that Angelina wanted to get Marge's equipment, and considering it unnecessary, she gave it to the girl. She also added that they ate from the same plate and became very close. The warrior was shocked and wondered why the alchemist needed the equipment. Elia replied that there was a possibility she could track the Marge with the help of a golem. The warrior looked furious and immediately gave the order to head to the bell tower, which offered a view of the city, and find the alchemist. On the city street, under the towering bell tower, Angelina, looking very determined, moved forward and declared that they were going after Marge. On the top of the rocky hill stood the master, Kei-san, and the village chief. The biggest problem was food. As there were not many edible animals in the dungeon, the forest was small, there were few animals, and hunting was insufficient. Marge replied that they urgently needed to provide food for all the people in the village, since the dungeon monsters had disappeared. There was hope that they would find something, but it was noted that they could not rely on the unstable cave forever. And they were searching not only for valuables and resources, but were also confident they would find something valuable. A crowd was running towards them. The faces of the runners expressed relief and joy due to the discovery. The good quality and quantity of what was found were noted, as well as the fact that everything went well and they encountered no one, although there were fears that everything would be destroyed. The master asked if the interlocutor was sure that everything was fine with him, while the latter joyfully exclaimed that this was his new life, gifted by a friend with the valuable duration of his own, and he would do everything he could on his part. Asagi asked what it was about. Marge, raising a finger, explained that he was conducting an experiment. Although he was not sure if it would work, he continued by saying that it is necessary to conduct maintenance. The master explained that, in his opinion, if the dungeon loses its king, it will collapse. He wondered whether it might be better to look for a new king. Asagi expressed bewilderment, believing that the king for an S-rank dungeon could not be found, but the guy replied that he had brought an egg, the egg of Vritra. Marge explained that he placed this egg in the deepest part of the labyrinth, and as a result, everything stabilized. The master noted that one of the goals of their trip was to find a safe place to nurture the egg, and as the egg hatches and grows, the labyrinth will become richer, and the egg itself is a dragon with the power to sustain the labyrinth. On the horizon, among the sharp mountain peaks, a small village could be seen, indicating the location where the white and blue dragons reside. Thus, the first step in their plan was completed. Marge pondered that the size of the labyrinth depends on the strength of the king, and the previous king's limit was 52 floors. He was sure that with Vritra the labyrinth would grow even more, but if Vritra could not coexist with humans, he would take responsibility and seize the labyrinth again. At this time, a group of people carrying baskets reported that they had found everything. The leader of the werewolves exclaimed in surprise that it was water. Looking at the contents of the large jug, he noted that the quality of the water was not much different from the source in the village. The master explained that the water quality on the 4th floor was good, and the water was located near the entrance, so he made the others look for it on the 1st floor as well. Asagi asked what the water was for, hinting that it was enough to create a wheat field. Marge raised the question of why the field was not yielding a harvest. The village chief suggested that perhaps the soil had been depleted of everything necessary for growing wheat, and even if they tried to grow other crops, the soil's lifespan would only be extended by a few years. The master continued to explain that if the same crop is grown in the same field, it will grow worse, causing constant problems. It was noted that there is little space in the village for expanding the fields. Marge admitted that he was also concerned about this issue. He recalled hearing about crops that can be grown for hundreds of years, even on a small area. The guy replied that it was rice, and explained the features of growing rice in flooded fields, where water maintained a constant soil balance. Asagi thoughtfully responded that the field required a large volume of water. Initially, rice was planted in a country with a lot of rain and abundant water. It was noted that if they could maintain an infinite source of water, the difficulty would be resolved. The head of the werewolves replied that he did not expect it to go this far and asked if there were seeds, to which he received a response about their absence. In the city of Kinui hotels, Marge gave an order to Shizuko, noting that it was his first address to her as king, and hoped for a responsible attitude towards his request. The girl respectfully responded to his words, confirming them. Juran, sitting at the table with a satisfied smirk, claimed that his era was not over yet. Despite having lost a lot of money, he was confident that everything planned would happen next year, as he was called. Shizuko was approaching him. The girl asked him why he looked like a monster. seeing how he was filled with anger from what he had seen. The man replied that she had left, implying that she shouldn't be here, to which Shizuko replied that she had returned. The daughter of the head of the werewolves replied that she was here for Garan to buy something from her, which caused confusion. Then she continued that it was Marge who told her. After what had happened before, Shizuko was sure that he was a greedy person and wouldn't give up a cent, even if his hand were cut off. The man replied that only a fool spends money on unnecessary things. The girl, smiling, spoke about trusting Garan in financial matters, considering him a reliable supplier. The man sharply replied to her that she was impolite and no one would help her. Shizuko replied that Garan had forgotten something. He asked his bodyguard Eldro what he had said to Marge during the attack. He replied that he boldly asked him to try to take something from him, to which the master said he would take everything. Yaren asked what was said in response. The muscular Eldro, standing like a little boy, replied that he should try if he could. Shizuko claimed that Garen was also present in that dialogue. Marge won. The girl explained that there was nothing wrong with taking back her things, and it wasn't about forgiving him, but simply that the master entrusted the matter of money to him specifically. Duran was outraged by Eldro's stunt and said that his words were tantamount to a sale. Shizuko continued by saying that if the merchant cooperates, he will be allowed to keep everything to himself, but they suggest creating a business with the given money and sharing part of the profits. The girl, looking angrily, warned the bald merchant that if he did something bad again, she would come. Duran, on the other hand, pointing at her with his finger, was outraged by the idea of making a profit without any investments. Shizuko instructed the merchant to take the collected sum and deliver it to the mayor's house, from where the money was supposed to be transferred to them. The man, holding the paper in horror, exclaimed that he could not oppose this, as even Kanui was on their side. Duran, lying on the floor, was mourning his business, and the girl sat next to him and informed him that she had another task for the trader. The man was shocked to see the divine silver ore in front of him. He was asked about the Renono jewelry store, which was run by a strong woman trusted by precious metal traders. Durana was asked to exchange the ore for money with this woman. The bald merchant lay in his dreams with a huge pile of gold and silver coins, rejoicing in the divine silver ore. He was confident that even if he divided it, he would still make a large profit. Shizuko, frowning, addressed Garan, asking whether he would carry out the assignment or not. After a brief hesitation, the merchant resolutely agreed to do it. On the hill, Shizuko joyfully informed Marge that she had completed the task, and he praised her for a job well done. Duran had a talent for business, Rena was smart and trustworthy, and Marge had money and goods. Shizuko asked if the enemy would really be useful, to which the master replied that it was better to capture the enemy than to kill them. He continued by saying that at the moment they were creating fields, and all they had to do was wait for the result. The waterway was taken from the labyrinth, and the dead wheat fields were reused as rice fields. Workers collected fallen leaves to turn them into fertilizers for the village. The rural residents of the werewolf village worked, and the landscape of the village changed. Shizuko, Kokatan, and Marge observed what was happening, noting that everyone was working very hard, and said that they must meet expectations. Shizuko, smiling, expressed confidence that they would manage. She talked about how in a month and a half the result of their efforts would be known. A gigantic white golem appeared, towering over 40 meters, its massive body made of stone. Its appearance caused an uproar and shaking of the ground. Everything indicated the arrival of Angelina. Angelina crouched down to the kids. Marge introduced himself and asked if she knew him. The girl replied that she knew him from Ardor. The guy asked if she had been ordered to find him. The girl, spreading her arms wide, joyfully exclaimed about her, quote, academic interest. Marge was surprised. The master thought that Artor was going to hire another alchemist after he fired him, and it was unclear whether it could be Angelina. Marge concluded that she had no ill intentions. Despite her ability to create golems, he noted that she could not have simply appeared before him if she were plotting something bad. The master noted that the golem could be controlled remotely, while the puppeteer hid in a safe place and attacked from afar, and that the golem, without the puppeteer's instructions, could only perform simple commands. The woman alchemist said that Marge knew quite a lot about this, to which he responded negatively. The villagers ran to Asagi to tell about the giant. He asked if it was somehow related to Shizuko and asked not to worry, saying he would talk to Marja. Instead, he asked about the situation in the village. He was told that everything was going well, but the village head warned that if they went too far, it would be dangerous, and they needed to think about ways to support the core. Asagi ordered to follow Shizuko's instructions. The village head was worried that there was a lot of work and not enough strength. Marge said that the village's food supplies had run out quite quickly. Asagi replied that the food he bought in Kinui would help stave off hunger for a while. Prisoners of war and werewolves explored the labyrinth, training for its deepest part. The master noted that the future which will bear fruit is not far off. Marge turned to Angelina, saying that he had no time for her academic interests, as he was not interested in them at the moment. The girl agreed with him. The guy didn't want to let Angelina go because she found out the village existed. Smiling, Angelina offered him an interesting deal. Angelina stated that she saw the entire village and that there is a beautiful rice field here, but the number of people and work is unbalanced, as the biggest problem is the quote-quote-quote labor shortage. She was confident that they would solve this problem. She noted that everything would be in exchange for safety, food, clothing and shelter, land for a workshop, materials, and clean beds. And then her final request was made. Angelina, glowing, asked to live together with her. She was incredibly happy and full of hope. Marge, with a surprised expression on his face, replied that he would do everything except the last request. The girl began to throw a tantrum and said that this was not good. In the end, Angelina, with a joyful smile, said that she was satisfied that most of her demands had been met. The girl raised her hands, explaining that her workshop is now improved and she can freely explore skill borrowing and golems as much as she wants. Marge, however, informed her that her skill is not as convenient as she thinks. Angelina, smiling, said that she had already considered all the risks associated with this. The master, surprised, asked if she had even considered the possible risk of losing the Earth Golem skill, and asked her to first listen to how skills on credit work. Marge explained to the girl that if she couldn't pay off her debt, she would lose her skill. He asked if she understood, and the girl looked upset. Angelina said that she doesn't mind losing the Earth Golem skill for creating great golems, and added that the skill is indeed necessary to create them, but production and operation are two different things. The girl explained that she is the only one who can control golems better than anyone else and is ultimately confident that the skill will be returned to her. She appeared confident in her words. The deal was made, and until Angelina leaves the village territory, she will be free. Moreover, she will be provided with support if necessary. The girl, rejoicing, showed that she understood everything. 2 golems were working in the field. According to Marge, they could easily lay water channels, being twice as strong as farm horses. Angelina explained that she had finished adjusting the width of the chute and minimizing the losses from hydraulic pressure. Marge replied that it would be great if they could retain the water that was absorbed into the ground or evaporated. The girl replied that she understood. Koe-san asked Shizuko if she was sure she wasn't being followed, to which the girl replied that she was simply following the trail with her golem dogs and considered the possibility that someone might be following her. She added that it was quite easy to find the hidden village. Angelina admitted that when she heard from Ellie-chan that Artura-san was looking for Marge, she extended her trip to 2 months. The girl explained that she had been walking day and night, crossing mountains and valleys, and even took a detour to make sure she wasn't being followed. She looked tired but determined. She used a golem instead of legs, so that no one could follow her. She also added that she did this after the road became too steep, so even if someone was watching her, they would have already lost sight of her. Arthur looked angry and exclaimed Angelina's name, saying he hoped she was there. 3 weeks later, in the residence of Duke Abek, a man in an elegant suit sat in a chair and said that he had warned Arthur to be more careful. He replied that as a person engaged in the work of an adventurer, no one knows what will happen tomorrow. Arthur added that a person will not be able to achieve anything without risking their life. His words were full of determination. Arthur asked if the interlocutor was curious, since he came on official business, because he couldn't just drive him away. However, the interlocutor added that he had already spoken about the conditions of the meeting with his master earlier. The man in the formal suit reminded that Arthur is seen as a natural disaster, and if they suddenly see an uprising, they must immediately inform him, and then they will meet again because he must control everything. Arthur confirmed that he remembers that conversation. The man continued, saying he hoped Arthur would pay attention to this and asked for the witness to come forward. An elderly man with a long beard and in traditional clothing was sitting on the floor with his legs crossed. The man in the black suit said it was unforgivable to put shackles on an ordinary resident, and asked Arthur-san for a compelling reason for this. Arthur noted that the seated person was the mayor of the city hotel Kinui, which explained his apparent calmness in the unusual situation. The information was somewhat unexpected. The elder Arthur ordered to tell everything he had previously said to him, or threatened to behead him. The man in the suit demanded propriety, wanting to know the name and position of the mayor. Mayor Kinui, now sitting at the table, held in his hands an official permit, clearly confirming his authority. He introduced himself as Vincent and said he had been the mayor for 10 years. The elder noted that Werewolf previously liked Kinui. He thought that she suddenly left with the travelers but later returned, having bought a large quantity of goods. Vincent admitted that if he hadn't mentioned the name Mirage Dono, this wouldn't have happened. In the old man's story, he was asked about Mirage Dono, and such a question did not leave him indifferent. Arthur was clearly disturbed by this and wanted to hear the story in detail. Vincent was asked what kind of goods they wanted to purchase from him. He replied that it was food products, building materials, rice, and agricultural tools, and also added that there were some weapons. He was asked what he meant. Arthur, sitting in the armchair, looked extremely agitated, his eyes wide open. He shouted that he smelled the uprising of werewolves, foreshadowing a, quote, major rebellion. The man in the suit noted that he met Vincent for the first time and mentioned that his name had recently caught his attention. He continued by talking about the Burman unit, an elite group with a solid roster, whose soldiers suffered casualties in the line of duty following the Artura-san incident. He added that a report had come in stating that 3 of them had died and 1 was missing. The elderly mayor holding onto the table was clearly shocked when he was informed that his name appeared in the report. The mayor exclaimed that the person in the city whom he trusted to destroy the monsters had told him the whole truth. The old man was asked to state the name. The mayor uttered the name Marji-san. He was scared because he did not want to reveal the name. Arthur, with a mad expression on his face and a wide smile, spread his arms wide, demonstrating his rightness. He claimed that the person behind the purchase of all these goods was the very same Marge who betrayed his squad and picked up the werewolf. He continued to gloat, claiming that Marge betrayed his comrades, chose suspicious people, and bought dubious goods. He believed that even as an S-rank adventurer, he was easy prey, considering the power of the Duke and his own strength. The man in the suit hospitably pointed to the majestic double doors, indicating that his master was waiting inside. Arthur was eagerly anticipating the meeting. Arthur, with a face distorted by anger and a mad look in his eyes, stared ahead, promising to take back everything that had been taken from him. He shouted for Marge to just wait, expressing his determination to get revenge. Marju was informed that the rice fields were spoiled. He concluded that only 2 fields remained, and the rice field that was divided into 7 parts was also destroyed. The werewolf guy ordered to select only the rice that could be examined, and to burn everything else. He also added that there were still good reserves left. Residents were explained that if it is a disease, it could infect other rice fields, so they need to stop its spread. Several plots of land were already burning, and the werewolves watched the events with concerned faces. Koei said that everything would be fine, to which Marge agreed. Shizuko approached the master. She anxiously asked if they would manage it, and the master answered affirmatively. He placed a hand on her shoulder, explaining that their job was to ensure they would overcome anything that might happen. Angelina sat on the ground, holding a straw of rice in her hands, while the master and Shizuko were having a dialogue. The girl was asking about the reason for such destruction of the fields. The female alchemist explained that the cause of the disease was mold, and the only way to deal with it was to burn the affected crops. Despite the water channels being separated, the risk of infecting other rice fields remained high, and the question arose of how to avoid the worst. Marge, with a concerned expression, realized that a significant loss had occurred, but now he knew the cause and ways to combat it. Angelina confirmed that if a fungal plant grows near rice fields, it should be quickly removed, as it weakens the roots of the rice plants. One of the villagers was running, stumbling over the grass. He was shouting that Marge-sama was in trouble, warning of the impending danger. Everyone was informed that an army, numbering over 500 people, was approaching from the east. It was added that they had a coat of arms on their flag. Marge gazed in surprise at the coat of arms on the armor, which he recognized. The Duke Abik sat majestically on a horse in luxurious clothing and a fur cloak. Next to him was Arthur, and behind them stood a multitude of warriors, with banners indicating the arrival of a powerful army. Asagi anxiously asked Marja what they should do, and he ordered to call Berman and the others from the distant Azure. He also instructed Yuzu-san and Asagi-san to prepare a temporary command post in his house, and the others to take any weapons they could. The master declared that it was time to prepare for the journey, getting ready for the upcoming events. The army, consisting of numerous armored warriors, lined up on hilly terrain, preparing for battle. One of the soldiers expressed surprise that such a large standing army ended up in such a place, to which he was told that it was even better, as the less space there was, the fewer enemies there would be. Huge golems appeared on the battlefield, causing the soldiers to exclaim in horror. Despite their fear, one of the soldiers reassured another, saying that the commander had warned them about the possibility of golems appearing, although he was not sure that it was really them. The soldiers were setting up cannons, preparing for battle. Angelina expressed confidence that she would be able to handle the situation, as it was her duty, although it would be difficult to deal with the opponents without killing them. The armored warriors stood in formation, discussing the presence of the Duke's army. One of them suggested that the reason might be the girl they had heard about, and added that he had heard rumors of a half-human named Shizuku, who was gathering followers to humiliate people and make them suffer. The brunette, with a belligerent expression, Renono, clutching her chest, furiously asked why everyone was standing here chatting. She ordered them to go and gather things, if they had so much free time. The man with a frightened face was pointing into the distance. At that moment, Renono saw Shizuko and Marge, then grabbed her head in amazement. A squad of knights on horseback moved forward, led by a knight with a determined look. He announced that this was a knightly order. The knight continued, saying that they were knights of the Order of the White Phoenix, the fastest unit among the 7 knightly orders. He spoke these words with a confident expression on his face. He received a message about the uprising of the half-humans in this city. He explained that the Knights of the Order of the White Phoenix are known for their bravery and are real hunters of half-humans directly controlled by the capital. The residents, smiling, said that they had come to save them. Jiran called the others simply howling dogs and expressed the opinion that there was no need to waste their precious time coming here. Jiran stated that he does not want any problems, as he needs to make a profit, and that he was only following Shizuko's initial instructions. Renono tried to stop him. The Knight of the Order noted that all those who conspired with the demi-humans would face punishment. On the ground, traces of blood were visible, and nearby lay Guran's hand, severed by the sword of the knight who sat on horseback. Renono ran up to Jiran. The knight stated that they, the half-humans, are different creatures. The girl was furious and exclaimed that there is no need to cut up a person with the face of a monster. The knight stated that humans and half-humans are not equal in the eyes of the law, and that they do not hesitate for a moment to kill humans, as their behavior is harmful to humanity, which history has proven. He also explained that these people are difficult to understand, but nevertheless, they should be loved as humans. He added that these are foolish citizens who cannot distinguish half-humans from others and treat them as humans. Renono angrily asked if he was going to kill him just because he treats them as humans. Warriors with spears and halberds stood in formation, preparing for the cleansing of the city. One of the knights, a representative of the 36 Knights, declared that they were commencing the cleansing of the city to ensure that people do not trust those who are not human and will never become the cause of tragedy. The Knight of the Order said that after this, prayers would be offered for them to learn to distinguish people from them. Shizuko came to the rescue, extending her hand forward, and her mana activity level was 81.937. Behind her were Renono and Jiran, who watched her actions in amazement.